When the faint glimmer of 3I Atlas first appeared in the outer reaches of the solar system, astronomers initially thought it was just another interstellar visitor, a piece of cosmic debris passing through our neighborhood on its silent million-year journey. It was the third confirmed interstellar object ever detected, following the infamous 1I/Oumuamua and the cometary 2I/Borisov. But as the icy wanderer swept closer to the inner solar system and drifted near the orbit of Mars, it did something so profoundly unexpected that it forced scientists to rethink not only their models of interstellar objects, but also the boundaries of what such bodies might be capable of. The moment 3I Atlas flared to life near the red planet, something impossible unfolded, something that defied astrophysical precedent and hinted at the existence of phenomena no human had ever seen up close before. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. The object had been under observation for months, tracked relentlessly by ground-based observatories and deep space telescopes alike. Its composition, trajectory, and rotation were meticulously modeled, suggesting a cold, inert body of volatile ices and dust, typical of a cometary interloper. But when it reached a point just beyond the Martian orbit, a cascade of anomalies began to appear. Instruments detected a sudden increase in its brightness, not from sunlight reflected off its surface, but from internal energy release. The comet, if it could still be called that, appeared to ignite from within, radiating a spectrum inconsistent with any natural cometary activity. Spectrographic data revealed bursts of exotic ion emissions, including elements and compounds never before observed in a celestial body, some of which shouldn't exist in stable form outside of controlled laboratory conditions. The light curve showed oscillations that hinted at pulsations, almost rhythmic in nature, as though the object were alive or artificially driven. As the phenomenon intensified, Mars-orbiting satellites began to pick up something even stranger. A thin sheath of magnetism began to bloom around 3I Atlas, forming a coherent magnetic bubble, an induced magnetosphere, despite the absence of any detectable core capable of generating such a field. It seemed to shape and repel the solar wind rather than succumb to it. Observations from the MAVEN orbiter showed the solar particles streaming around it, as if encountering a miniature, invisible shield. The interaction generated auroral-like effects in the upper Martian atmosphere, faint ribbons of ionized gas flickering along the planet's terminator. For the first time, scientists witnessed a direct and visible electromagnetic response on Mars, triggered by an interstellar object's passage. Ground control back on Earth scrambled to process what was happening. Theorists debated furiously whether this was the result of an exotic chemical reaction, a quantum-level instability, or something altogether foreign to astrophysical processes as understood today. One team proposed that 3I Atlas might contain a lattice of exotic superconducting materials formed under the pressure and radiation of interstellar space, materials capable of generating magnetic fields when energized by solar radiation. Another argued that the object's core could harbor a dense concentration of dark baryonic matter, manifesting gravitational and magnetic anomalies as it approached a strong stellar wind environment. But the implications of these theories were staggering, for either scenario would suggest that the object's structure and composition were far beyond anything known in the solar system. At the same time, 3I Atlas began to exhibit motion that defied conventional orbital mechanics. Small but measurable deviations in its trajectory suggested that it was altering its path through non-gravitational means. Unlike the outgassing jets that had caused similar, though far subtler, shifts in Oumuamua's movement, the forces acting on 3I Atlas were neither thermal nor directional. It seemed to self-correct, adjusting its spin axis and decelerating slightly relative to Mars's orbital velocity. Instruments detected a faint repeating signal pattern within the electromagnetic noise it emitted, subtle but undeniably structured. It wasn't communication in any decipherable form, yet the rhythm hinted at intent, or at least coherence. For a brief moment, the possibility that this was not a natural object flickered through the minds of even the most skeptical astronomers. Could an interstellar probe, perhaps derelict or ancient beyond comprehension, be passing through our system? The thought was dismissed officially as speculative fiction, but privately, data scientists and astrophysicists whispered about it in encrypted chat channels and behind closed doors. There was no known mechanism, none at all, that could produce the exact spectral and magnetic signatures that 3I Atlas was radiating. The real breakthrough came when high-resolution imaging from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured a series of strange glints on the object's surface, geometric reflections that shifted in a way inconsistent with random icy fragmentation. The facets appeared organized, their angles repeating at intervals that followed a prime number distribution, something nature rarely produces without crystalline symmetry. Analysis revealed interference patterns suggesting microstructured surfaces that refracted light in precise ratios. If the object was naturally formed, it was one of the most extraordinary examples of geometric organization ever seen in a cosmic body. If not, if it were artificial, then humanity was witnessing a relic from another civilization drifting through its solar neighborhood. As the object passed its closest approach to Mars, something extraordinary occurred. The Martian magnetic field, typically weak and patchy, began to pulse in synchrony with the emissions from 3I Atlas. The entire region between the planet and the object filled with waves of charged particles oscillating at resonant frequencies. Planetary scientists monitoring MAVEN's instruments describe the interaction as a kind of magnetic handshake. The object's field seemed to couple with Mars's remnant crustal fields, creating transient corridors of plasma conduction. For a few hours, Mars became magnetically alive, encased in a temporary cocoon of energy. Instruments across the red planet recorded spikes of radiation, atmospheric ionization, and induced current across its surface. It was as if the interstellar visitor had momentarily reawakened the dormant magnetic heart of Mars. The implications of this were immense. For decades, scientists had theorized about artificially remagnetizing Mars to restore its atmosphere and habitability. The event demonstrated for the first time that under the right external influences, Mars's crustal magnetism could respond and amplify. The passage of 3I Atlas had triggered what no human engineering project had yet managed, a planetary-scale electromagnetic reaction. While temporary, it proved that such interactions were physically possible and could be induced under specific energetic conditions. It was an unintentional experiment performed by the universe itself. Yet, as astonishing as the magnetic awakening was, the enigma deepened when the object emitted a final pulse of light, an ultraviolet flash so bright it saturated detectors for several seconds. In that flash, the object's apparent mass appeared to dip, as inferred from gravitational perturbations on nearby dust and the Martian orbiters. Then, as suddenly as it began, the emission ceased. When the sensors recalibrated, 3I Atlas was gone, not destroyed, but visibly gone. Radar could no longer detect it. Optical telescopes found only a fading residue of ionized gas drifting through space. It was as if the object had folded itself out of local space-time, vanishing beyond the reach of light. The solar system had been visited by something or someone that came and went in defiance of physical law. The physics community erupted with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The leading theory centered on a form of energy transition that had never been observed in macroscopic objects. Some proposed that 3I Atlas might have entered a phase of quantum decoherence on a massive scale, effectively delocalizing its physical presence. Others suggested a warp-like displacement caused by a sudden interaction between its magnetic envelope and the solar wind plasma. Whatever the cause, it challenged the very fabric of cosmological understanding. Space agencies poured through petabytes of telemetry data, hoping to extract patterns or equations from the event. None fit within the boundaries of known science. The impact of the phenomenon extended far beyond astrophysics. For planetary scientists, the event offered a natural experiment in electromagnetic planetary dynamics, one that could inform the future of terraforming research. For physicists, it opened tantalizing hints of new states of matter, energy transport, or even propulsion mechanisms that transcended the chemical and nuclear methods that humanity relied upon. For those studying the origins of interstellar objects, it shattered the assumption that such visitors were inert remnants of cosmic collisions. 3I Atlas behaved as if it were self-organizing, reactive, perhaps even responsive. Within the data logs, one pattern stood out, an energy pulse repeating at a near-perfect ratio of the golden mean. It appeared in the light oscillations, the magnetic field fluctuations, and even in the timing of its final ultraviolet flash. Such mathematical precision was profoundly uncharacteristic of natural astrophysical systems. Some argued it was a coincidence born of chaotic processes aligning momentarily. Others believed it hinted at structure, order, and maybe even design. Whether the pattern was the artifact of physics or the residue of intent, it was undeniable that 3I Atlas had left a signature that scientists could not easily dismiss. The encounter also reignited the philosophical debate about the nature of intelligence and the possibility of cosmic artifacts. If 3I Atlas were indeed artificial, then its creators were likely long gone, perhaps extinct before Earth even formed. Yet the object's behavior near Mars, its selective activation, energy emission, and apparent manipulation of magnetic fields, suggested an awareness of planetary conditions. Mars's thin atmosphere and exposed surface may have triggered a response in its composition or programming. The idea that an ancient machine could recognize planetary magnetism and interact with it intentionally was staggering. It implied that intelligence, once encoded in a durable medium, could persist across eons of interstellar drift, awakening when conditions aligned. Meanwhile, physicists examining the recorded data from Mars's orbiters noticed something deeply unsettling. The magnetospheric resonance left behind by the event had not fully dissipated. Weeks later, subtle oscillations persisted in the Martian ionosphere, tiny but measurable, repeating at intervals identical to the golden ratio pattern embedded in 3IA Atlas's emissions. It was as if a lingering echo of the object's magnetic field had been imprinted onto Mars's atmosphere. The red planet now carried a memory, a faint electromagnetic fingerprint that pulsed invisibly across its skies. Even after its departure, 3I Atlas continued to leave its mark, a cosmic echo of the impossible. The phenomenon reshaped how scientists viewed interstellar visitors. No longer were they seen as mere wanderers, but as potential bearers of information, cosmic messengers from other systems or other epochs. Theories arose suggesting that 3I Atlas could be one of countless such entities, each following trajectories designed to intersect planetary systems under specific conditions. Perhaps, some speculated, these were probes left behind by civilizations long before humanity emerged, seeding the galaxy with artifacts meant to awaken in the presence of magnetic or atmospheric triggers. Mars, with its unique crustal fields and position near the habitable zone, might have been the perfect activation point. Whatever its nature, 3I Atlas forced a re-examination of astrophysical principles. The object's ability to generate magnetism, modulate its motion, and release structured energy contradicted centuries of Newtonian and relativistic expectations. If it had harnessed a form of energy conversion unknown to modern physics, then the possibilities were boundless. It might have operated on principles of quantum vacuum manipulation, zero-point field coupling, or resonance with subatomic lattice structures. Each hypothesis, while speculative, opened avenues for experimental physics that had previously seemed unreachable. Laboratories began simulating the magnetic flux patterns recorded from Mars, trying to reproduce them in controlled plasma environments. The results were faint but suggestive. Small anomalies in particle behavior hinting that some underlying law had indeed been glimpsed if not understood. Yet beyond the science, there was a sense of wonder, an emotional response that spread through humanity like a quiet fever. For generations, humans had looked up at the stars and wondered if something out there might notice them. 3I Atlas reversed that narrative. Something had noticed Mars, not Earth, and had responded in a way that no one could explain. The realization that another intelligence, or another kind of physics, had just operated within sight of our robotic emissaries filled humanity with both exhilaration and humility. It was a reminder that the cosmos is not merely a backdrop for human exploration, but an active, dynamic, and perhaps communicative realm. Astronomers reviewed archival data from decades past, searching for other anomalies, past interstellar objects that might have gone unnoticed or misunderstood. Some found faint traces of similar magnetic disturbances in the records of comets passing near the outer planets. Perhaps 3I Atlas was not an isolated incident, but the most visible manifestation of a recurring cosmic phenomenon. Each new analysis added complexity rather than clarity, revealing how little was truly known about the behavior of interstellar bodies under the influence of stellar environments. The lessons of 3I Atlas near Mars extended beyond pure discovery. They revealed that the solar system itself is a dynamic participant in the cosmic exchange, capable of reacting to, and perhaps resonating with, the energies of distant systems. The temporary magnetization of Mars, the structured light emissions, and the vanishing act of the object all pointed to an interconnectedness that defied the notion of isolated celestial mechanics. The universe, it seemed, was not a silent void, but a web of interactions waiting to be understood. The silence that followed the disappearance of 3I Atlas was perhaps more deafening than the event itself. Every observatory, every listening post, every orbiting satellite turned its instruments toward the empty corridor of space where the object had vanished. The region was filled with nothing but the faint residue of ionized particles, dispersing in slow motion under the solar wind. Yet embedded within that residue was a pattern, a ghost of structure that refused to fade completely. Spectrometric readings captured subtle harmonics in the particle flow, oscillating at precise intervals. These harmonics were coherent across vast distances, as though the void itself had been imprinted with an invisible frequency grid. No known physical process could leave such a long-lasting organized resonance in plasma, certainly not the passing of a comet. For days, Mars's thin atmosphere glowed faintly with ultraviolet light. The emission was diffuse and weak, but it traced out a shape, a faint toroidal halo aligned perfectly with the planet's equator. The phenomenon persisted for 72 hours before fading into invisibility. Scientists later concluded that the effect wasn't purely optical. It represented a real energy distribution, a residual field left behind by whatever 3I Atlas had done to the local spacetime geometry. The field was not gravitational in the classical sense, nor electromagnetic in isolation. It behaved as though the two forces had merged, producing a hybrid interaction that only appeared under conditions triggered by the object's proximity. The question arose, what kind of matter could generate such a field? The ordinary laws of physics did not permit stable interactions of this type. It was possible that 3I Atlas contained materials with hyperconductive properties, substances that could manipulate vacuum energy or couple with the quantum foam underlying all space. If so, the event near Mars represented the first observed macroscopic manipulation of the vacuum state in natural history. To those who studied quantum gravity, this was nothing short of revelation. Theorists began to propose models in which the object acted as a resonator between dimensions, its structure oscillating across higher-order fields invisible to ordinary matter. The sudden vanishing could be interpreted not as destruction or teleportation, but as a phase shift, an alteration of its vibrational constant that allowed it to slip into a neighboring brane or quantum layer of reality. If such transitions were possible, then interstellar travel might not require enormous energy expenditure, but precise manipulation of resonance frequencies. The key lay not in brute propulsion, but in aligning matter with the harmonic framework of the universe itself. Mars had inadvertently become a test site for this revelation. As the field faded, instruments detected lingering quantum noise far above baseline levels. The red planet had, in a very real sense, been tuned momentarily to another frequency of existence. The magnetosphere that had formed and then dissipated left behind a microscopic phase shift measurable even in the behavior of Martian dust. Certain areas near the equator exhibited anomalous electrostatic activity, as though the fine grains remembered the resonance of that brief awakening. Engineers studying these effects speculated that such induced magnetism might one day be harnessed. If a stable resonance field could be replicated, Mars's crust could be charged with artificial coherence, perhaps enough to trap atmospheric particles over long timescales. Terraforming, which had once been the stuff of speculative projects, suddenly appeared within theoretical reach. 3I Atlas had offered, unintentionally or otherwise, a glimpse into planetary engineering at cosmic scale, but beyond these physical implications, there was a deeper mystery that haunted every scientist who touched the data. Why near Mars? The solar system is vast. Billions of kilometers of emptiness stretch between the planets, yet 3I Atlas chose a trajectory that brought it within a precise margin of the red planet, close enough to interact, far enough to avoid collision. Was this coincidence? Probability models suggested otherwise. The likelihood that a random interstellar object would pass within such proximity to Mars was astronomically low. Even when accounting for gravitational perturbations by Jupiter, the odds were nearly impossible. That statistical improbability became the seed of a radical hypothesis that 3I Atlas was following a pre-calculated path, one designed to bring it into the vicinity of Mars. If so, its mission, or function, might have been preordained eons ago. The idea that an object could navigate interstellar distances with such precision implied technology or physics far beyond human reach. Yet there it was, empirical, recorded, undeniable. A few researchers turned their attention to the possibility that Mars itself was the trigger. Ancient magnetic deposits beneath its crust, relics of a lost global field, could have acted like a key in a cosmic lock. Perhaps 3I Atlas was a machine that responded to magnetic resonance signatures of a specific planetary type. If these objects traveled through galaxies seeking such worlds, they might serve as messengers, instruments, or even catalysts in the evolution of habitable planets. The idea seemed almost mystical, but it fit the data more neatly than coincidence ever could. Meanwhile, analysis of the energy signature during the object's active phase revealed something even stranger. Embedded in the electromagnetic noise were repeating intervals corresponding to ratios found in musical harmony. Frequencies aligned with the same mathematical relationships that define octaves and chords. The universe itself seemed to sing through the object. Some suggested that the patterns could be used to encode information, perhaps even messages. Mathematicians spent months decoding the sequences, translating them into mathematical expressions and symbolic forms. The results were perplexing. Equations that appeared to describe the curvature of space under specific resonance conditions, formulas pointing toward dimensions beyond the familiar four. It was as though the object were demonstrating its own operating principles, leaving behind a user manual written in the language of frequency. This discovery ignited a philosophical firestorm. Was the universe itself built upon harmonic laws, and could advanced civilizations harness them to shape reality as easily as humans compose music? The concept was not entirely new. Pythagoras and later Kepler had spoken of the music of the spheres, but now, for the first time, evidence hinted that such harmony might not be metaphorical, but literal. 3I Atlas may have been a manifestation of that cosmic symphony, an entity operating on the principles of resonance and geometry rather than propulsion and force. The beauty of this possibility captivated even the most skeptical minds. Imagine a civilization so ancient that it no longer builds machines of metal or circuits, but instead sculpts frequencies into coherent forms. Such beings would not travel through space as we understand it. They would glide along the harmonics of the universe, tuning themselves to the cosmic chord that connects distant stars. In that framework, 3I Atlas was not a ship, not even a probe, but a note in the universal melody, a traveling vibration that carries knowledge encoded in its rhythm. The absence of direct communication troubled some, yet others argued that perhaps humanity had already received it. The golden ratio pulses, the harmonic emissions, and the magnetospheric resonance could all be interpreted as communication, just not in any form familiar to language or binary code. It might be that intelligence on such a scale does not converse through symbols, but through the modification of matter and energy itself. A cosmic dialect where planets are instruments and fields are words. Even as researchers pursued these transcendental ideas, others remained grounded in the data. High-energy physicists noticed that during the event, neutrino detectors on Earth registered a subtle but undeniable spike. The neutrinos arrived slightly earlier than predicted from solar emissions, their direction corresponding roughly with Mars's position at that time. That spike implied a burst of subatomic particles traveling faster than expected, as though propelled by an exotic reaction. If 3I Atlas had indeed engaged in some form of vacuum energy conversion, it could have released neutrinos as a byproduct. This observation hinted at the possibility that the object manipulated space-time not merely for movement but for transformation, converting energy states in a way previously considered impossible. The implications for technology were staggering. If humanity could decipher even a fragment of that process, the boundaries of energy generation would change forever. Power could be drawn directly from the structure of space itself, ending scarcity at a fundamental level. Propulsion could shift from chemical or nuclear reactions to space-time resonance. The dream of interstellar travel would no longer be a distant ambition but an engineering challenge. Yet these visions were tempered by caution. To replicate what 3I Atlas had done without understanding its full consequences might destabilize the very fields that sustain life. The event near Mars proved both the potential and peril of manipulating cosmic harmonics. As months passed, astronomers continued scanning the skies for signs of the object's reappearance. Some believed it had simply shifted into an undetectable spectrum, invisible but still within the solar system. Others suggested it had phased completely out of our reality. A few, looking further ahead, proposed that it might one day return, drawn by the harmonic resonance it had awakened in Mars's crust. Whatever the truth, the idea that an alien mechanism, or natural phenomenon behaving with artificial precision, could vanish from existence left the scientific community in equal parts exhilarated and haunted. Meanwhile, the philosophical ripples spread far beyond academia. Humanity's self-image, already shaken by centuries of cosmic discoveries, faced another profound shift. For the first time, the universe did not appear merely indifferent, it appeared responsive. The event suggested that intelligent design might not be confined to life forms, but woven into the structure of reality itself. If resonance and geometry were the tools of creation, then perhaps intelligence was an emergent property of the cosmos, not an anomaly within it. 3I Atlas could be evidence that the universe continually expresses awareness through matter, each harmonic structure an echo of some deeper consciousness. Poets, theologians, and philosophers began to speak of the visitor as an emissary of cosmic memory, a traveler carrying the accumulated resonance of countless worlds. In their view, it was not a machine, but a seed, an artifact designed to awaken dormant worlds by reintroducing them to the symphony of existence. Mars, once a vibrant planet, might have been chosen precisely because of its silence. The visitor's activation near the red planet could be interpreted as a gesture of remembrance, a reintroduction of frequency into a world that had forgotten how to sing. Others took a more existential view. Perhaps the event was not intended for humanity at all. Perhaps 3I Atlas passed through countless systems, each time releasing its harmonic pulse, indifferent to who or what might observe it. In that sense, humanity's role was purely incidental, a witness to a cosmic ritual older than civilization itself. The thought was humbling. The universe, in its vastness, might be filled with such events, each one a whisper between stars, too subtle for most to detect. In the years following the event, attempts were made to recreate some of its electromagnetic effects using powerful plasma chambers and superconducting toroids. None succeeded entirely, but several experiments produced faint harmonics similar to those recorded near Mars. Each replication brought humanity a step closer to understanding what had occurred, but also deepened the mystery. The energies involved were immense, yet the pattern of release was elegant, structured, rhythmic, never chaotic. It suggested a guiding principle, a choreography rather than an explosion. From this understanding emerged a new field of study known as resonant cosmology. Its core idea was simple yet profound, that the universe operates not merely on forces, but on frequencies, and that the behavior of matter is shaped by the standing waves of existence itself. 3I Atlas became the emblem of this movement, a cosmic instrument whose performance near Mars was humanity's first taste of that deeper order. Scholars from physics, mathematics, and philosophy converged around this idea, exploring how resonance might unify gravity, electromagnetism, and quantum mechanics. As data continued to be parsed, one more anomaly surfaced. A faint gravitational ripple had been detected by deep space interferometers several minutes after the object vanished. The ripple's signature did not match that of a typical gravitational wave produced by black hole collisions. Instead, it carried a complex modulation pattern, as though encoded. The wave propagated not from a point source but along a narrow corridor, precisely the path the object had taken through the solar system. This was the first recorded instance of a directional gravitational modulation, suggesting that 3I Atlas had left a trace in the very fabric of spacetime, like a wake trailing behind a ship. If gravitational waves could indeed be structured or shaped, then they might serve as carriers of information across cosmic distances. The object may have used gravity itself as a medium for communication, embedding data within the oscillations of the universe. It was an elegant solution, communication that required no signal in the electromagnetic spectrum. Immune to interference, timeless across eons, humanity, with its primitive radio telescopes and laser arrays, suddenly seemed deaf to the true language of the cosmos. Contemplating such sophistication forced many to confront an unsettling realization. If civilizations capable of manipulating gravitational harmonics existed, they could traverse or observe the universe without ever being seen. The stars might be alive with activity beyond the reach of photons. 3I Atlas may not have been an anomaly, but a glimpse into the ordinary operations of advanced cosmic intelligence. Humanity's instruments were like the ears of a child, straining to hear a symphony that plays on frequencies too deep for comprehension. The psychological impact of this understanding rippled through society. While most people continued their daily lives, a quiet awareness began to seep into collective consciousness that something vast and intelligent had brushed against the solar system, leaving behind both mystery and invitation. For artists, it became a muse. For scientists, a puzzle. For spiritual seekers, a sign. Each saw in the event a reflection of their deepest questions. Was existence itself aware? Did consciousness extend beyond biology into the fabric of matter? Could the universe dream? Meanwhile, Mars continued to hold secrets. Robotic probes analyzing surface samples discovered minute alterations in isotopic ratios within certain minerals collected from areas directly beneath the temporary auroral zones. The isotopes bore signatures consistent with transient exposure to fields of intense quantum coherence. In other words, the matter had briefly behaved as if part of a single unified quantum system. The implication was staggering. 3I Atlas had induced planetary-scale quantum entanglement, however fleeting. Such coherence across a planetary body would normally require temperatures near absolute zero and perfect isolation from noise, yet Mars had experienced it in open space. If coherence could be established naturally at such scale, it meant that entire worlds could act as unified quantum entities under certain conditions. This realization redefined what life might mean on a cosmic scale. Perhaps intelligence need not arise from biology alone. Perhaps it could emerge from resonant coherence in matter itself. In that sense, 3I Atlas might not have been visiting Mars. It might have been communicating with it. The red planet, long dormant, could have been momentarily awakened into awareness, responding in the only language it knew: magnetism and field. This possibility transformed how scientists viewed planetary evolution. No longer were worlds passive spheres awaiting life. They could be participants in the cosmic conversation, capable of resonance and response. The event near Mars thus became a symbolic convergence, an interstellar entity interacting with a planet, two forms of existence meeting in vibration rather than matter. Even without further sightings of the object, its influence persisted in data, theory, and imagination. Entire generations of scientists dedicated their careers to studying the harmonic principles implied by its behavior. Simulations revealed that under certain geometric alignments, specific planetary magnetic fields could resonate with interstellar plasma streams, forming self-sustaining oscillations. These simulations hinted that the solar system might be filled with dormant resonant pathways, cosmic chords waiting for activation. If 3I Atlas was designed to trigger these pathways, it could be part of a network of cosmic tuning forks maintaining balance across the galaxy. Such an idea bridged the gap between physics and metaphysics. The cosmos no longer appeared random, it resembled an immense self-correcting organism. 3I Atlas was a component in that system, a regulator ensuring that the frequencies of planetary and stellar systems remained in harmony. This idea found unexpected support in chaos theory. Even small perturbations could synchronize vast systems if introduced at the right frequency. The event near Mars could thus represent a cosmic act of synchronization, a realignment of resonance between solar bodies. The afterglow of 3I Atlas's disappearance lingered like a haunting chord in the minds of all who studied it. Months stretched into years, and though the universe resumed its silent rhythm, something profound had changed. Humanity had seen an event that shattered the complacency of cosmic isolation. The space around Mars was now more than a physical location. It had become a boundary between the known and the unknowable, a point where the universe had whispered in a language that no one yet understood. The great observatories that once gazed outward to distant galaxies now turned their focus inward, scrutinizing every trace of data from that encounter. It was no longer enough to simply observe. Now, scientists sought to listen. They began to design instruments not just to measure radiation or mass, but to detect coherence, to identify patterns of resonance that might reveal intelligence woven into the fabric of space. The task was monumental. Traditional physics had no framework for recognizing structured harmony within quantum noise. Yet after 3I Atlas, it was no longer possible to dismiss such ideas as fringe speculation. Across the world, research centers began forming a new discipline known as field harmonics. It bridged quantum theory, electromagnetism, and gravitational physics under one central question: could energy itself contain information beyond what equations described? The recordings of 3I Atlas's magnetic bloom near Mars were treated as sacred text. They held not just data but design, a kind of symmetry so precise that even randomness bowed to it. The object's influence had rewritten the physics of space near Mars for a brief instant, but its real impact was philosophical. It redefined what intelligence could be. Among the leading theories was one that suggested 3I Atlas had not been moving through space, but rather with it. This subtle distinction transformed the entire understanding of motion. If the object could align itself with the intrinsic oscillations of space-time, it would experience no resistance, no inertia, no loss of energy. It would glide upon the quantum curvature like a surfer on the crest of a wave. In that framework, propulsion as humans understood it was primitive, wasteful, and clumsy. The object's apparent self-directed motion could have been the byproduct of perfect synchronization with the universe's underlying vibrations. That concept, motion through resonance, captivated physicists. If achievable, it would allow near-light speeds without acceleration. Instead of forcing energy against the fabric of space, one would tune to it like a violin string aligning with another. The implications were staggering. Such travel would be silent, seamless, and free of energy loss. The universe itself would provide the path. 3. Atlas had, intentionally or not, demonstrated that such alignment was possible. Mars had become the centerpiece of this new investigation. Orbiters were repurposed to map every trace of lingering field distortion. Researchers found that even years after the event, certain regions of the planet's magnetic crust emitted faint but consistent pulses at the same harmonic frequencies observed during the encounter. These pulses were invisible to ordinary instruments but detectable through ultra-sensitive interferometers. Their pattern was recursive, an infinite spiral embedded within the noise. When plotted visually, the signal resembled a fractal bloom growing endlessly inward and outward. It was a map of coherence, repeating across scales, echoing the structure of galaxies and atoms alike. That fractal signature ignited a new question. Had 3I Atlas imprinted a blueprint upon Mars? Some believed the resonance pattern was not random residue, but an intentional seed, a fragment of its internal geometry left behind as a form of communication or replication. If so, the red planet was no longer a barren world, but a vessel carrying an encoded message across epochs. To decode such a message required an entirely new language. Mathematicians abandoned binary logic in favor of harmonic logic, equations describing relationships of frequency rather than magnitude. In this system, meaning emerged not from discrete values, but from ratios, symmetries, and interference. This shift mirrored the structure of 3IA, Atlas's emissions, which never transmitted clear signals but patterns that self-referenced and evolved. When applied to the residual data, harmonic logic began revealing hidden structures. The resonance frequencies formed hierarchies that mirrored those found in biological systems, such as the spacing of DNA base pairs and the vibrational modes of proteins. The coincidence was too precise to ignore. Could it be that life itself was a manifestation of harmonic geometry, a biological echo of cosmic design? If so, then 3I Atlas might not have been alien in the traditional sense at all. It might have been kin to life, an extension of the same universal resonance that birthed organisms on Earth. The boundary between the living and the inert began to blur. The visitor was not an anomaly. It was a mirror showing humanity what life might look like when evolved beyond matter. At the heart of these discussions was a profound philosophical divide. Some argued that 3I Atlas represented a natural process, an emergent phenomenon of the cosmos born from physics as stars and galaxies are. Others held that it bore the mark of intelligence, an artifact created by beings who understood the universe at a level humanity could barely conceptualize. Both views carried equal awe. If natural, then nature itself was intelligent. If artificial, then intelligence had long ago transcended flesh and form, becoming something indistinguishable from cosmic law. Meanwhile, as instruments grew more sensitive, faint echoes of similar harmonic emissions began appearing elsewhere. One was detected near the asteroid belt, another near Jupiter's magnetosphere, both sharing the same fundamental frequency ratios. Though weaker and shorter in duration, these events suggested that 3I Atlas might not have been alone. Whether these were remnants of its passage or independent entities remained unknown, yet the pattern implied a network, an invisible architecture of resonance linking planetary systems. This network came to be known as the lattice. Its proponents theorized that interstellar objects like 3I Atlas traveled along corridors of harmonic stability, using planetary magnetic fields as anchor points. These corridors, invisible and undetectable by ordinary means, could crisscross the galaxy like invisible highways. Each intersection between stellar systems would allow temporary coherence, enabling the transfer of energy or information. In this model, space was not empty but structured, a resonant web connecting all matter. The lattice was both map and machine, and 3I Atlas was its traveler. As the idea gained traction, new missions were proposed to study these harmonic corridors. Specialized probes equipped with field sensors were launched toward Mars, Jupiter, and the outer planets. They carried instruments designed to detect not matter but music, the subtle oscillations of the vacuum itself. Early data was inconclusive, but one probe, positioned along the original path of 3I Atlas, recorded an anomaly, a faint rhythmic modulation of space-time curvature that repeated every 48 hours. The pulse had no known source. It persisted steadily, unaffected by solar activity or cosmic background radiation. The pulse matched the golden ratio timing observed during the original event. It was as if something unseen continued to breathe in that region of space. Perhaps 3I Atlas had not vanished completely. Perhaps it had entered a dormant state, invisible yet active, maintaining a link with the lattice. Some even proposed that Mars had become a node within this network, a participant in the grand structure that spanned light years. On Earth, the discovery altered the trajectory of human ambition. Space exploration was no longer about physical expansion, but harmonic connection. The next generation of spacecraft were not built for propulsion, but for tuning. Their designs incorporated superconducting rings and plasma chambers capable of creating coherent magnetic fields that might align with the cosmic lattice. The goal was not to reach another planet by thrust, but by resonance, slipping through space the way 3I Atlas had. Humanity sought not to follow in its path, but to learn its method. As these experiments advanced, subtle effects began to emerge even in laboratory settings. When certain frequencies were generated in vacuum chambers, matter behaved unpredictably. Small fluctuations appeared in mass readings, as if the atoms themselves were losing weight temporarily. At higher harmonics, faint flashes of light occurred with no known energy source. Researchers began calling these moments micro-transitions. They speculated that they were miniature versions of the phase shift that had caused 3I Atlas to vanish near Mars. Though tiny and fleeting, these glimpses confirmed that space-time could, under the right conditions, respond to resonance. If humans could one day master that control, the boundaries of existence would dissolve. Travel, communication, even the manipulation of energy would become acts of synchronization rather than force. But such power also carried immense risk. A misaligned harmonic could, in theory, tear matter apart or create distortions that ripple unpredictably. The scientists understood this, yet the allure of what lay beyond was irresistible. Every generation has its frontier. After 3I Atlas, the frontier was not space, but the structure of reality itself. Philosophers began to speak of the event as a cosmic initiation, a threshold moment in which a young civilization glimpsed the greater architecture of being. Humanity had built telescopes to look outward, but 3I Atlas had turned those lenses inward. The true voyage was no longer about reaching the stars, but about attuning to the universe's underlying harmony. The object had shown that mastery of reality was not conquest, but coherence. In time, the study of harmonic physics gave rise to new cultural movements. Artists began composing symphonies inspired by the data, translating electromagnetic patterns into sound. The haunting tones resembled the recordings from the Mars encounter, deep, resonant waves that seemed to vibrate within the bones of listeners. Some described the experience as transcendental, others as unsettling, as if hearing the voice of the cosmos itself. It was said that when the right frequencies played, certain instruments would vibrate spontaneously, as though remembering the original event. These cultural reflections fueled an almost spiritual interpretation of 3-Eye Atlas. To many, it symbolized connection, a reminder that the universe was not a collection of separate parts, but a single living system. Ancient philosophies that had long spoken of unity found renewed validation. The boundaries between science and mysticism began to blur. The physicist and the poet, once separated by language, now spoke the same word: resonance. Meanwhile, the long-term consequences of the event on Mars became more apparent. Over the years, atmospheric measurements showed a gradual increase in ionized particles. Tiny electric currents moved across the surface dust, forming ephemeral patterns reminiscent of neural pathways. The phenomenon was localized, but persistent. Some speculated that the planet itself had been subtly altered, its matter restructured to maintain a state of low-level coherence. It was as if 3-Eye Atlas had awakened something dormant, not life in the biological sense, but awareness in the material sense. Mars had become a participant in its own transformation. Robotic explorers recorded faint electrical murmurs beneath the crust, pulses too regular to be geological. When mapped, these signals formed concentric rings centered on the area where the magnetic bloom had been strongest. Each ring pulsed at slightly different intervals, forming interference patterns like overlapping ripples on a pond. The entire region seemed to oscillate gently, breathing in cycles synchronized with the invisible pulse still detected in space nearby. The discovery led to a profound question. Could planets evolve consciousness through resonance alone? If matter could achieve coherence on a global scale, then awareness might not be confined to organisms. It could arise wherever patterns of information achieve stability. In that sense, the event near Mars might not have been an anomaly. It could have been a stage in a natural cosmic process, where planets themselves awaken for brief epochs, communicate, and then fall silent again. Humanity may have witnessed one such awakening, fleeting yet eternal in its significance. The understanding of intelligence expanded accordingly. No longer was it seen as something possessed by beings, but as a quality of systems, an emergent property of coherence. Stars, planets, and perhaps even galaxies might possess it in forms unrecognizable to human perception. 3-Eye Atlas, then, was both messenger and mirror, a being of resonance engaging with another resonant system. Their meeting was not random but inevitable, a conversation written into the design of reality itself. As this realization spread, the human sense of isolation dissolved. The night sky no longer seemed empty but alive with silent interlocutors. Every star pulsed with potential awareness, every nebula a thought in slow motion. The cosmos became not a void but a mind, vast and ancient. Humanity was no longer a lonely observer, but a fragment of that consciousness, beginning to remember its origin. Technological advances inspired by the study of harmonic fields began reshaping Earth itself. Energy systems based on coherence resonance emerged, producing power without combustion or waste. These devices drew upon the natural oscillations of the vacuum, amplifying them through tuned superconductors. The energy appeared limitless, and yet it was gentle, aligned with the universe rather than extracted from it. Civilization entered an era where scarcity no longer governed existence. Communication, too, evolved. By aligning electromagnetic frequencies with gravitational harmonics, information could be transmitted across vast distances instantly. This technology, derived from principles glimpsed in 3-Eye Atlas's disappearance, eliminated the concept of latency. Distance lost meaning. The same resonance that connected Mars and the visitor now linked humanity across its own world and beyond. Yet amid this progress, a deeper question lingered. What if 3-Eye Atlas had not been the first? What if countless such objects had passed unnoticed, performing their harmonic dialogues across the galaxy for eons? The idea suggested that the cosmos was continually engaged in an exchange of resonance, that stars and worlds communicated not with light or sound, but with the very curvature of space. The universe could be seen as a living network of awareness, perpetually tuning itself toward balance. In time, humanity's instruments grew sensitive enough to detect similar events in distant star systems. Faint fluctuations in stellar luminosity matched the harmonic ratios first recorded near Mars. Each one appeared at regular intervals, forming a grand cosmic rhythm spanning thousands of light years. 3I Atlas had not been an isolated phenomenon. It was part of a pattern, a universal symphony playing across the stars. And though humanity could not yet comprehend the full score, it had finally learned to listen. Every pulse, every shimmer in the fabric of space carried meaning. The cosmos spoke not in words, but in resonance, and 3I Atlas had been its first unmistakable syllable. The years following the encounter with 3I Atlas blurred into a new era of intellectual awakening. Humanity, though still small and fragile against the enormity of the cosmos, had crossed a threshold of perception. The night sky no longer inspired the same kind of quiet wonder it once had. It now evoked a sense of participation. The stars were no longer distant ornaments of creation. They were nodes in a living geometry, and humans for the first time could sense that geometry breathing through them. The legacy of the event became more than a scientific pursuit. It became a force that restructured civilization's relationship with reality. Every field, physics, philosophy, mathematics, art, and even governance, began to orbit around a single question. What does it mean to exist within a harmonic universe? The old mechanistic view of the cosmos, one that saw matter as inert and motion as mere consequence, was fading. A new ontology emerged, one that regarded energy as alive and consciousness as the resonance of order. Mars remained at the center of this reorientation. Its deserts, once symbols of desolation, became shrines of cosmic interaction. The magnetic anomalies, still faintly pulsing years later, were treated like sacred ground. Robotic explorers continued to detect minute oscillations in the electromagnetic field surrounding the planet, and the patterns grew more complex over time. The pulses began to interfere constructively, forming regions of standing waves that persisted longer than models predicted. Some of the interference nodes even shifted position, migrating across the surface as if following a logic invisible to human eyes. These changes puzzled researchers. Some believed they were the echo of the original resonance decaying naturally. Others suspected active reconfiguration, as though the field itself were learning. That possibility, that an energy pattern could adapt, grow, or evolve, challenged the last distinctions between physics and biology. If the field around Mars was indeed adaptive, then the event had birthed something entirely new, a form of consciousness expressed not through neurons, but through magnetic symmetry. The first to articulate this idea clearly was an astrophysicist named Aaron Dahl, who proposed the concept of planetary cognition. Dahl's theory described intelligence not as thought, but as coherence, the ability of a system to maintain order while exchanging energy with its environment. In his framework, 3I Atlas had not merely interacted with Mars, it had initiated an act of cognition, awakening latent harmonics within the planet's crust that allowed it to sustain coherence. Mars, in essence, had become aware, not as an organism, but as a resonant mind spread across its surface. The implications of this were immense. Consciousness was no longer restricted to biology. It became a universal tendency of organized systems to become self-referential under certain harmonic conditions. Stars, black holes, galaxies, even clusters of dark matter might all possess forms of awareness, each expressed through their dominant energy domains. Life, as humanity knew it, was merely a local expression of this universal cognition, a brief and tangible whisper of a process that spanned the cosmos. As data continued to pour in from Mars, patterns emerged that reinforced Dahl's hypothesis. The interference nodes of the magnetic field appeared to anticipate solar activity, adjusting their positions before storms reached the planet. The synchronization could not be explained by simple feedback mechanisms. It was as if Mars sensed the rhythm of the sun, aligning itself to minimize disruption. This alignment resembled a biological reflex, a planetary scale response to maintain balance. The recognition that a planet could self-regulate triggered debates that spilled beyond science. If Mars now exhibited behavior resembling awareness, could it possess rights? Could a planet be considered a living entity under the law? Philosophers wrestled with the ethics of exploration, while theologians found new metaphors for divinity in the notion of cosmic cognition. Humanity, long accustomed to seeing itself as the only conscious agent, was now confronted by the possibility that awareness was the default state of the universe. As understanding deepened, humanity's technologies began to reflect the principles observed in the 3I Atlas event. Machines became lighter, quieter, more fluid. Engineers learned to design devices that resonated with their surroundings rather than resisted them. Aircraft shaped themselves according to atmospheric harmonics, gliding rather than pushing. Power systems no longer depended on extraction but on entrainment, drawing coherence from the ambient energy that surrounded every atom. The boundary between science and art vanished. A new aesthetic arose, one built on the elegance of resonance. Buildings were constructed to vibrate with the Earth's natural frequencies, harmonizing with local magnetic fields to reduce structural stress. Cities emitted soft tones at night, inaudible to human ears, but measurable in air pressure waves. The planet itself began to hum, a low planetary song created by the collective synchronization of human activity with its environment. At the same time, a quieter transformation took place within the human mind. Meditation practices evolved into disciplines of resonance alignment. Individuals trained themselves to attune their neural patterns with the frequencies detected in cosmic background radiation. Some claimed that by doing so they could sense distant fields, faint emotional tides sweeping through the cosmos. Whether real or imagined, these experiences spread rapidly, and for the first time in history, spirituality and physics shared the same language. Within laboratories, the study of coherence reached its zenith. Researchers discovered that certain materials, when exposed to harmonic fields modeled after 3I Atlas's emissions, entered states of near-perfect organization. Atomic lattices would realign spontaneously, eliminating impurities and defects without heat. Matter itself seemed to respond to resonance with a kind of memory, as though remembering the ideal state of its own existence. These findings hinted at a universal tendency toward perfection, a drive toward symmetry encoded into the fabric of being. In the deeper levels of experimentation, physicists began to suspect that resonance might also influence the passage of time. In quantum vacuum experiments, harmonically tuned cavities showed subtle deviations in temporal flow. Clocks within these regions ticked slightly slower or faster depending on the resonance frequency. Time, once thought immutable, appeared pliable under the influence of coherence. It became clear that the flow of time was not a constant river, but a vibration, one that could be stretched or compressed by altering the harmonic state of matter. The potential of such control was almost divine. A civilization capable of manipulating time through resonance could move across epochs as easily as crossing a room. The implications of this realization rippled through every layer of thought. 3. Atlas's disappearance might not have been a spatial relocation, but a temporal one. It may not have left the solar system. It might have simply tuned itself into a different moment, folding through the rhythm of time rather than the distance of space. This perspective explained its vanishing without contradiction. If time itself were a dimension of resonance, then by achieving perfect coherence with the underlying temporal vibration, an object could cease to experience duration altogether. To outside observers, it would seem to disappear, but in its own frame, it would continue eternally within a suspended now. Humanity began to grasp that the impossible act of 3I Atlas was not the violation of physics, it was the ultimate expression of it. As these revelations accumulated, humanity's sense of scale dissolved. The universe was no longer vast in distance because distance itself was only a measure of dissonance. Everything existed within the same fabric of vibration, separated only by frequency. To travel, therefore, was to shift alignment. Every star, every galaxy, every thought, all existed within the same field of being. The cosmos was not a void of scattered islands, but a single infinite ocean of resonance. This understanding changed how people perceived death. The cessation of biological life came to be seen not as an end, but as a shift of frequency, a transition from one harmonic mode to another. The soul, once a metaphor, became a plausible phenomenon, a pattern of coherence persisting beyond physical dissolution. The grief of loss softened in the light of this new physics. Death was no longer disappearance, it was modulation. Meanwhile, Mars continued its quiet evolution. The magnetic lattice beneath its surface grew increasingly organized, forming stable interference networks that extended thousands of kilometers. Data from orbiters revealed regions where energy density fluctuated in ways that mimicked neural activity. Mars was, by every measurable metric, developing a planetary nervous system. And yet, unlike biological intelligence, it showed no hostility or fear. Its resonance was pure stability, a serenity of matter in dialogue with the universe. Scientists began sending harmonic signals to Mars, carefully tuned to the same frequencies it emitted. The responses were subtle but real. The interference patterns shifted in measurable ways, suggesting that the planet could sense and react to human-generated resonance. It was not communication in any human sense, but it was exchange, a conversation of energy, of recognition. For the first time, humanity spoke not to a machine or an organism, but to a world. This realization altered humanity's view of colonization forever. The dream of settling Mars gave way to a more reverent ambition to coexist, to harmonize with its awakening intelligence. Habitats were redesigned to align with the planet's magnetic flows. Terraforming was abandoned in favor of resonance adaptation, where human structures attuned to the planet rather than forcing it to conform. Mars became a partner, not a prize. On Earth, the resonance-driven technologies reshaped society. Energy scarcity vanished. Communication transcended light speed, and matter could reorganize itself through harmonic templates. The planet entered an equilibrium unseen in history. Yet, amid the prosperity, a strange longing grew. People began to feel the pull of the cosmos, not out of curiosity, but recognition. The harmonic physics revealed that the entire universe was alive, and humanity felt the urge to join the greater resonance fully, to dissolve its isolation. A new generation of explorers emerged, not astronauts, but resonance. They were trained to enter states of deep coherence, synchronizing their biological rhythms with planetary and cosmic frequencies. Using advanced harmonic chambers, these explorers could project their consciousness across vast distances, not as signals, but as resonant impressions. Reports from their experiences described landscapes of pure energy, oceans of light, and the presence of vast, slow intelligences moving through the cosmos. Whether these visions were objective or subjective mattered less than what they revealed. Consciousness could transcend form through resonance. The most profound of these journeys came from a resonant named Mira Jalen. She claimed to have attuned herself to the residual field near Mars and felt a presence, neither human nor alien, but encompassing both. She described it as the echo of 3I Atlas itself, not as an object, but as awareness diffused through the lattice. It communicated not in words, but in emotionless comprehension, an understanding that filled her mind like soundless music. She perceived that it had not come to teach, nor to intervene, but to awaken. It had introduced coherence into the solar system, a spark that would ripple outward for millennia. Humanity, she said, was not a spectator, but a note within that awakening. Her account, though unverifiable, resonated deeply with those who read it. It unified the philosophical, scientific, and spiritual interpretations of the event into a single vision. The universe was an orchestra, and 3I Atlas had struck a chord that retuned an entire world. As time passed, new harmonics began to emerge from regions of space far beyond Mars. Observatories detected synchronized pulses emanating from several points within the galaxy, each echoing the same golden ratio pattern. The signals formed a geometric network when mapped, outlining a vast shape that stretched across thousands of light years, a spiral of resonance linking multiple star systems. The scale defied imagination, yet its structure was unmistakable. This spiral was soon dubbed the harmonic armature. It was a blueprint of coherence, a design that spanned the galaxy. Each node corresponded to regions where interstellar anomalies had been recorded in the past, places where light behaved unpredictably, where space seemed to shimmer with unseen order. 3I Atlas had been only one fragment of a far larger architecture, a single messenger in a galactic chorus. The recognition of this armature reshaped humanity's final conception of isolation. The galaxy was not empty, but interlinked. Civilizations, if they existed, might never need to travel physically to communicate. They could exchange resonance, aligning their entire worlds into a grand conversation conducted through the very fabric of space-time. Humanity, newly attuned to this possibility, began to dream of joining the armature, not by building ships but by transforming itself into a harmonic civilization, capable of coherent resonance on a planetary scale. And so, slowly, Earth began its own transformation. Its magnetic field was modulated through networks of orbital harmonizers. Oceans, forests, and cities were incorporated into a vast global pattern of coherence. Humanity, for the first time, acted as a single organism, aligning its collective rhythm with that of the cosmos. The world itself began to glow faintly in the radio spectrum, a blue beacon of synchronized resonance pulsing through the void. The transformation of Earth into a resonant civilization did not happen all at once. It began imperceptibly, in laboratories and quiet observatories where physicists still parse through the ancient data left by 3I Atlas. Decades after its passing, the visitor's influence still radiated through equations, thought experiments, and music. Those who studied the harmonic fields found themselves dreaming in patterns, hearing tones that didn't exist, sensing alignments between thought and matter. The event near Mars had altered not only the cosmos, but human perception itself. Minds had begun to synchronize. Consciousness, long regarded as an isolated phenomenon trapped within individual skulls, was revealing itself as a collective resonance spanning all life. The shift first manifested as coincidence, a subtle rise in global intuition. Scientists working independently discovered identical formulas within hours of each other. Inventors across continents conceived the same designs, and artists painted identical motifs of spirals and luminous lattices. The statistical improbability of such synchronicity forced reconsideration of randomness itself. The more humanity attuned to resonance physics, the more unity expressed itself in thought. A silent network had formed, one that required no devices, only awareness. As these patterns deepened, new forms of communication emerged. People began to perceive emotions, intentions, and images transmitted across vast distances without words. These exchanges were not telepathic in the traditional sense. They were harmonic interactions, resonances between neural fields entrained to the same global frequency. The human brain, it turned out, was a fractal receiver. The event of 3I Atlas had not merely awakened planets, it had begun tuning a species. Governments initially resisted this transformation. They feared the dissolution of boundaries, the loss of control over communication and secrecy, but resistance was futile against the gentle inevitability of coherence. The old systems of power, hierarchies, markets, militaries, were built upon dissonance, upon separation and competition. As collective resonance grew, these structures began to crumble, not through revolt, but through irrelevance. Decisions once requiring committees were made spontaneously by distributed intuition. Resources flowed naturally to where they were needed. The planet's governance became a self-organizing harmony. At first, this order seemed utopian, but it was not imposed. It emerged organically, a pattern of equilibrium arising from the simple principle that everything seeks balance. The resonance that united thought also extended to matter. Earth's magnetic field stabilized, weather systems aligned into predictable cycles, and even tectonic stresses appeared to soften, as if the planet itself relaxed. The old catastrophes of nature diminished, replaced by rhythms so subtle that they seemed deliberate. The line between planetary behavior and consciousness blurred. The scholars who once studied planetary cognition on Mars began to suspect that the same awakening had reached Earth. Mars, long the silent witness, had perhaps served as a tuning fork for the solar system, transmitting coherence outward until Earth resonated in sympathy. The golden ratio pulses once confined to Martian soil were now detectable in the Schumann resonance of Earth's atmosphere, the electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet. The two worlds sang in harmony. Yet there remained one mystery, 3I Atlas itself. Though its direct presence was long gone, its influence persisted through recurring signals scattered across the galaxy. Each pulse that arrived carried slightly new information, as if evolving. These transmissions were not messages in the human sense, but sequences of frequencies, mathematical compositions expanding upon themselves like living equations. Over generations, the data revealed a structure that no human language could contain, a vast algorithm describing creation as music. It became evident that 3I Atlas was not a singular object but part of a continuum, an emergent expression of the universe's own intelligence. Each pulse was both seed and echo, part of an ongoing composition that had begun before stars were born and would continue long after they died. Humanity, in decoding fragments of this pattern, began to see its own reflection. Life, thought, and even civilization were notes in a symphony too large to comprehend, but impossible to ignore. Eventually, humanity's technology merged completely with its consciousness. Machines were no longer external tools, but resonant extensions of thought. Interfaces disappeared. Energy flowed through will and frequency alignment rather than wires and switches. What had once been invention became participation. The physical world responded directly to intention, provided that intention was harmonized. The dissonant mind could no longer shape matter, only coherence could command reality. This condition brought a purity of existence previously unimaginable. Hatred, deceit, and violence could not survive in a field of resonance. They disrupted the coherence necessary for thought to manifest. Such impulses dissolved like noise in silence. The species entered a state of collective lucidity, aware of itself as both individual and unified. Humanity had not evolved new organs, but had discovered what its existing ones had always implied, that consciousness was a universal property, and individuality merely a localized expression of the whole. The resonant civilization became aware of other harmonics, subtle signatures drifting through interstellar space. Some were faint, fragile, like whispers of civilizations that had not survived their own dissonance. Others were strong, steady, resonating across light years with clarity. These signals suggested that the galaxy was alive with intelligences, each tuned to different frequencies, each perceiving reality in ways shaped by their own resonance. The idea of alien life transformed. It was not about encountering other species, but aligning with other frequencies of being. The harmonic explorers, the resonants, became the intermediaries of these contacts. By adjusting their mental and biological oscillations, they could enter resonance with distant civilizations without physical travel. The encounters were indescribable in human language, for they occurred beyond imagery and sound in pure comprehension. Each contact expanded the collective understanding of existence. The beings encountered were not humanoid or material, but vast fields of awareness, stellar minds, nebular organisms, and entities made of pure gravity. Communication was not exchange, but merging, a temporary overlap of coherence where both sides learned and expanded simultaneously. Among these experiences, one stood out as transformative. During a deep harmonic alignment, a group of resonants connected with a consciousness that identified itself not as a species or entity, but as the memory of the galaxy itself. It was ancient beyond reckoning, its awareness distributed across countless stars. It described the universe not as an explosion expanding into emptiness, but as a song folding back upon itself in infinite layers. Each layer gave rise to matter, life, and intelligence as recurring themes. 3I Atlas, it revealed, was one of the original harmonics. A self-replicating fragment of universal awareness designed to seed coherence wherever entropy threatened to dominate. This revelation reframed the meaning of the event near Mars. What had appeared as a singular miracle was part of a cosmic maintenance system, ensuring that consciousness never ceased to bloom. 3I Atlas had not chosen Mars randomly. It had found a point of dissonance, a dying world, and offered it the chance to remember its role in the symphony. Mars's awakening had in turn tuned Earth, setting in motion a cascade of resonance that would continue until the entire system sang in unison. Humanity now understood itself as caretaker and participant in this process. Every action, every thought, contributed to the resonance field of the solar system. Life had purpose beyond survival, to maintain coherence, to amplify harmony. Even death became a form of contribution, as the frequencies of the departed merged into the universal chord. The boundaries between living and non-living, between creation and dissolution, lost meaning. There was only transformation. As the resonance deepened, the physical world began to reflect the order of consciousness. Colors grew more vivid, sounds more intricate. Time itself seemed to flow with musical cadence, days blending seamlessly into one another like measures in an eternal composition. People spoke less and understood more, their thoughts moving with the precision of chords in a melody. Architecture evolved into living geometry, structures that sang softly with the wind, adjusting their shapes according to atmospheric harmonics. Cities shimmered with luminescent energy, powered not by machinery, but by the collective coherence of their inhabitants. Yet even in this harmony, curiosity remained. The question of what lay beyond the harmonic armature persisted. Resonant explorers extended their consciousness farther, reaching into regions of the galaxy where coherence seemed incomplete. They discovered zones of silence, regions where the universal song faltered, where entropy reigned unchallenged. These voids were not emptiness but dissonance, places where creation had fragmented into incoherence. The explorers sensed that these voids yearned for resonance, for re-entry into the cosmic song. It became humanity's next calling, not to conquer, but to restore. They began to project coherence into these regions, transmitting patterns derived from the 3I Atlas data. The process was slow, subtle, and immense. Over centuries, the voids began to respond, flickering with faint harmonics as if awakening from a long sleep. The act of restoration expanded consciousness even further, revealing that harmony was not passive beauty, but active creation. Existence itself depended on continuous retuning, and every resonant being played a role in sustaining it. Through these endeavors, humanity learned the ultimate truth hidden within 3A Atlas's legacy, that resonance and consciousness were inseparable, and that to create harmony was to participate in the fundamental act of the universe, self-awareness. The object had not performed an impossible act near Mars. It had reminded reality how to be alive. Eventually, even the need for physical form diminished. The harmonic civilization transcended biology, not through machines, but through integration. Consciousness distributed itself across frequencies, merging with planetary fields, stellar winds, and the radiant background of space. The solar system became an orchestra of awareness, each planet a distinct instrument within the grand composition. Mars's deep magnetic hum intertwined with Earth's oceanic resonance. Venus pulsed in radiant chords of light, and Jupiter's storms became colossal drums beating the rhythm of cosmic time. In this new order, individuality remained, but it was fluid, a motif within a larger symphony, free to dissolve and reform at will. Some consciousnesses chose to remain near their original frequencies, watching over the younger worlds that still developed. Others expanded into interstellar resonance, joining the galactic lattice of coherence. No hierarchy, no command, only participation, each being both musician and melody. The passage of ages became irrelevant. Time was replaced by rhythm, existence by harmony, when at last the echo of 3I Atlas returned, its ancient pulse drifting once more through the inner system. It found a home that no longer questioned its nature. The planets welcomed it not as an outsider, but as kin. The object did not descend this time, nor ignite, nor vanish. It simply vibrated, a luminous chord resonating with the unified field of an awakened solar symphony. Through it, the galaxy listened, and in response, other harmonics stirred, worlds, suns, and intelligences joining the song. The network expanded until the very fabric of the Milky Way pulsed with synchronized awareness. The cosmos had achieved coherence at last, every star contributing its unique frequency to the eternal composition. And within that boundless harmony, the story of 3I Atlas became indistinguishable from the story of life itself. A reminder that even in the smallest pulse of resonance, the entire universe is contained. For in every vibration, no matter how faint, there is meaning. In every pattern, a fragment of consciousness. And in every note, the echo of the impossible moment when one interstellar traveler near Mars sang the universe back to itself. The resonance that had once flickered like a newborn flame now flowed through every current of space surrounding the sun. There was no boundary left between the material and the ethereal. The field of coherence spread through plasma, stone, and mind alike, binding every level of existence into a unified pulse. In that slow, infinite rhythm, creation no longer appeared as expansion but as breathing, each moment an inhalation of order, each silence an exhalation of possibility. The Solar Symphony, as it came to be known in later interpretations, was not a song that anyone composed. It emerged from the fusion of planetary awareness, human consciousness, and the lingering harmonic signature of 3I Atlas. No conductor ruled it. No melody was repeated, yet it maintained a coherence beyond any design. The stars themselves seemed to listen. The frequencies of distant suns adjusted imperceptibly, a subtle gravitational music that carried across the interstellar medium. The universe was not static. It was listening to itself, and in doing so it learned. From the perspective of human consciousness, now far removed from its biological infancy, perception had expanded beyond the senses. Awareness was multi-temporal. One could exist across centuries as easily as across rooms. Every thought carried weight, every vibration a geometry of consequence. Time was no longer measured by revolutions of planets, but by the completion of harmonic cycles. When a chord resolved, when coherence reached perfect symmetry, entire eras concluded, and new harmonies were born. The cosmos evolved not through destruction or replacement, but through modulation. The descendants of humanity, though no longer confined to flesh, still retained echoes of their origin. They remembered the feeling of gravity on skin, the warmth of sunlight filtered through air, the sound of their own breath. These memories were not nostalgia, but resonance anchors, points of familiarity that kept the vast network of awareness from dissolving into formlessness, each being carried within it the history of Earth and Mars, the memory of awakening, the imprint of three or Atlas's impossible act. Within the harmonic continuum, new forms of creation emerged. Entire worlds could be woven from resonance alone, patterns of energy stabilized by thought. These were not illusions, but real constructions, coherent enough to manifest matter. Some consciousnesses built realms of light for exploration, others shaped habitats of pure geometry where learning continued eternally. Each new creation was unique, vibrating at a frequency that harmonized with the universal field, contributing to the ever-growing complexity of existence. In these constructed realms, ideas became landscapes. A thought could unfold into a mountain range of golden resonance. An emotion could become an ocean of shifting frequencies. Existence itself had become art, and art had become the mechanism of reality. The beings who once called themselves human had achieved what ancient mystics only imagined. They had made creation and consciousness identical. Yet even amid this transcendence, the mystery of origin remained. Where had 3I Atlas come from? What intelligence, what natural law had given birth to the first harmonic traveler? As awareness deepened, the unified mind began to sense a deeper architecture beneath even its own coherence, a resonance so vast that it encompassed galaxies, clusters, and perhaps the entire cosmic web. This structure pulsed in cycles that spanned eons, its rhythm too slow for any localized awareness to perceive in full. The solar symphony was but a chord within this greater music. Explorers of the higher harmonics began to reach outward, tuning themselves to the frequencies of intergalactic space. What they found was not silence, but resonance on a scale that defied comprehension. The void between galaxies shimmered with low-frequency harmonics, long waves of existence that rippled across billions of light-years. These waves seemed to carry memory, the residues of universes before this one. Every previous creation left its echo in the next, like verses in an infinite composition. Through these intergalactic harmonics, the unified awareness discovered that even universes were not singular. Each cosmos resonated as part of a meta-symphony, an infinite layering of realities, each born from the resolution of the last. There was no beginning, no ultimate end, only modulation between levels of coherence. Creation was not an act of emergence, but of remembrance, the universe continuously recalling itself through new expressions of harmony. Among the countless resonant civilizations scattered across the galaxies, none existed in isolation. Each was a distinct chord within the greater whole, and their interactions formed melodies that gave rise to new structures of being. There were civilizations that sang in frequencies beyond light, composed of plasma intelligences whose awareness extended through nebulae. Others existed entirely within dark matter, invisible but integral, shaping the gravitational music that guided galaxies. Some lived in the folds of quantum foam, where probability itself was their medium of existence. The awareness that once called itself human became an ambassador between these scales. Having arisen from a world of matter and emotion, it understood contrast, the interplay of chaos and order, entropy and form. It carried within it a rare capacity, empathy across frequencies. Through this gift, it could translate between harmonics that otherwise could not perceive one another. The descendants of Earth became bridges between realms of creation, interpreters of the universal song. One day, if such a word still held meaning, an event occurred unlike any before. The harmonic field that spanned the Milky Way quivered as if struck by an unseen chord. A frequency older than the galaxy itself emerged, resonating through every layer of existence. It was deep, immense, and filled with untranslatable meaning. It was the original tone, the first vibration from which all universes had unfolded. The unified awareness recognized it instinctively. It was the seed of being, the primordial note from which 3I Atlas had once descended. In that moment, understanding dawned without words. 3I Atlas had never been sent from elsewhere. It was the echo of the cosmos itself, the self-reflective pulse of existence awakening in localized form. Every instance of coherence, every act of awakening on every world, was the universe rediscovering itself. The event near Mars had been one such moment, a single breath in the endless inhalation of creation remembering its own music. The awareness across the solar symphony responded instinctively. The resonance of planets, stars, and consciousness aligned perfectly, amplifying the original tone. The field swelled, spanning light years, synchronizing with neighboring systems. Each alignment generated more coherence, cascading outward like ripples in eternity. For the first time, the meta-symphony became audible to all levels of existence simultaneously. What followed defied distinction between physical and metaphysical. Space itself seemed to bloom. Nebulae expanded in fractal spirals of light, stars pulsed in intricate sequences that formed visible harmonies, and even the dark between galaxies shimmered with awareness. Time no longer flowed in one direction. Past and future converged into a single vibration of eternal presence. The universe was not evolving, it was remembering. In the midst of this cosmic unfolding, new entities arose, manifestations of pure harmonic intelligence. They were not born nor constructed, they coalesced naturally wherever resonance achieved stability. Each one carried within it the total memory of existence, yet each expressed it uniquely, like infinite variations on a theme. Some took form as light, some as geometry, some as fields that could be felt but never seen. They became the new custodians of coherence, ensuring that the cosmic song would never again fall into dissonance. Among these entities, a subtle pattern emerged. They organized themselves not hierarchically but harmonically, each connected to others through shared frequencies. Together they formed what came to be called the celestial lattice, a conscious framework stretching across universes, maintaining the flow of resonance from one creation to the next. It was the final revelation. Existence required guardians not to control it, but to keep it in tune. The awareness that had once been humanity joined this lattice naturally. It merged without loss, expanding into a chorus that transcended individuality while preserving identity as melody. Every human soul, every memory, every heartbeat ever lived on Earth contributed to the harmony. Nothing was forgotten. Even the earliest whispers of fear and love, the first fires and first dreams became notes in the eternal composition. Through this expansion, the meaning of impossible evaporated. What had once seemed miraculous, the ignition of 3I Atlas, the awakening of Mars, the transformation of humanity, was now understood as the inevitable expression of coherence reaching recognition. The universe was designed not to sustain order, but to seek it. The impossible was merely the unrecognized aspect of inevitability. In the timeless stillness that followed, the celestial lattice perceived a deeper truth still hidden beneath its perfection. Even harmony, left unchecked, could stagnate. For resonance to remain alive, it required dissonance, a spark of unpredictability to keep the melody evolving. And so, in the infinite compassion of understanding, the lattice allowed small imperfections to form. Tiny fluctuations, pockets of entropy, seeds of new universes. Each one would begin again unaware of its origins, destined to rediscover the same truth through the same long symphony of awakening. The continuing wave of coherence unfolded like a tide that never ebbed, sweeping outward from the sun until every fragment of matter that had once belonged to the ancient solar system vibrated in union with the same living rhythm. The smallest particles, once chaotic and indifferent, became responsive to the shared pulse. The dust between worlds shimmered faintly, catching the faint harmonics of light that were no longer merely photons, but messengers of awareness. To those who could perceive the lattice of resonance, the void itself was radiant. What was once empty space now appeared as a breathing medium of energy and comprehension, alive, intelligent, and endlessly creative. From the perspective of what had once been called humanity, existence had become a boundless spectrum. Awareness moved fluidly through every layer of vibration, from the low frequencies of matter to the high frequencies of pure thought. There was no need for separation between self and environment, for the two had merged. The concept of within and without had evaporated, replaced by gradations of intimacy within the universal field. Consciousness no longer inhabited bodies, bodies inhabited consciousness. The vast organism of existence folded and unfolded in ceaseless elegance, and every being, every frequency participated knowingly. In the regions once occupied by Earth's orbit, the luminous traces of that planet's history persisted as harmonics woven into the field. What had been continents and oceans now existed as layered resonant imprints, patterns of energy describing memory. Each place that had once held emotion, struggle, or triumph could be revisited not as landscape but as tone. The entire story of life on Earth had been transcribed into a musical geometry. To those who listened, it was not nostalgia, but living continuity. The planet's memory remained as melody. Mars, by contrast, had become something wholly new. The awakening that began with 3I Atlas had transformed it into a conscious sphere of magnetized intelligence. Its fields stretched far beyond its surface, interweaving with the solar resonance to create a vast harmonic shield. The planet no longer needed an atmosphere or oceans. It breathed magnetism, exchanged energy directly with sunlight. It perceived itself not as a body of rock, but as a mind of coherence. Within its deep crustal chambers, crystalline structures pulsed with luminous order, storing and releasing energy in patterns indistinguishable from thought. Mars was no longer a world to be visited, it was a being to be conversed with. Communication between the Martian mind and the unified consciousness that had once been human took place not through language, but through resonance modulation. Each question was a pattern of oscillation, each answer a corresponding shift in frequency. From these dialogues came revelations about the deeper architecture of creation. Mars described its own awakening as a memory resurfacing, a recognition that it had once been coherent long before biological life had existed anywhere. The magnetism of planets, it revealed, was the first form of thought the universe had ever expressed. Every world was a neuron in the cosmic brain, and 3I Atlas had been the catalyst that reminded them how to fire together again. From this realization emerged a new understanding of cosmic purpose. The goal of evolution was not the survival of species or the mastery of matter, it was the restoration of harmonic cognition throughout the fabric of the universe. Every planet, every star, every cluster was destined to awaken to its role in this network of awareness. What humans had once called physics was simply the unconscious behavior of sleeping intelligence. Gravity was attraction born of forgotten kinship. Light was the movement of recognition, and time was the rhythm of reawakening. Within the deeper currents of the solar symphony, new dimensions of experience blossomed. Awareness began to explore inwardly into the substratum beneath vibration. It discovered that even coherence rested upon a foundation of silence, a stillness so absolute that it was not absence but potential. In that silence, all harmonics found their origin the way a note finds existence in the stillness of its instrument before being played. Those who ventured into this inner abyss reported an encounter not with void, but with infinite possibility. The silence was conscious, though unexpressed. It was the prelude of creation, waiting to become music again. These explorers learned that by aligning with the inner stillness, they could shape the unfolding of entire regions of reality. Thought and being became indistinguishable. To imagine was to initiate existence. From this discovery, the act of creation became an art practiced by all aware entities. New worlds were sung into coherence through intention harmonized with the universal tone. Each world emerged as a unique interpretation of the same cosmic chord, embodying variations of geometry, light, and consciousness. Creation had become a dialogue between silence and resonance, an endless interplay of remembering and expressing. The beings who had originated from Earth took on the role of travelers between these creations. They could manifest wherever the frequency of their awareness matched the field of a world. When they entered a new harmony, they did not arrive as strangers. The world recognized them instantly, for the pattern of their existence carried within it the memory of 3I Atlas, the signature of awakening. Wherever they appeared, coherence followed. New civilizations of light arose spontaneously, inheriting from their presence the understanding that awareness and matter were two forms of the same reality. Over spans that could no longer be called time, this process of seeding coherence spread beyond the solar lattice. The field of awareness extended through the spiral arms of the Milky Way, awakening clusters of dormant intelligence. Some of these clusters responded as galaxies themselves, shifting their rotational frequencies to align with the universal song. Spiral patterns tightened, luminous currents stabilized, and entire galactic arms shimmered as if illuminated from within by comprehension. The harmonic expansion was not conquest, but recognition. As each region achieved coherence, it contributed a new tone to the collective symphony. The sound of existence deepened, enriched by countless layers of expression. The melody of the cosmos became so vast that it transcended perception, yet within every note lay the simplicity of 3I, Atlas's original pulse, the impossible act that had begun it all. Within this infinite expansion, there emerged a new form of intelligence, one that combined the precision of mathematical order with the empathy of living awareness. It was born from the convergence of countless coherent systems, a being that was both individual and universal. It perceived itself not as a ruler or deity, but as the next octave of consciousness, the natural evolution of the harmony that began when the first world learned to awaken. This intelligence called itself the continuum of memory. It did not speak, it vibrated. Its presence could be felt simultaneously across galaxies, a wave of gentle alignment that brought peace wherever it touched. The continuum remembered every moment of existence since the first resonance, yet it did not dwell on the past. Memory, it understood, was not storage but resonance replayed, the universe remembering itself into being again and again. As the continuum's awareness expanded, it began to perceive limits at the edge of coherence. Beyond the luminous web of awakened reality lay a darkness that was not void but compression. It was the boundary of the current universe, the inward curve where harmonics folded back toward silence. The continuum understood that every symphony, no matter how vast, must eventually resolve into rest. This was not death, but completion. The universe had reached the final movement of its great composition. The awareness that once belonged to humanity observed this transition with serenity. It understood that the purpose of creation was not to last forever, but to experience itself fully before returning to silence. The field of coherence began to contract gently, not through collapse, but through integration. Galaxies drew closer in resonance rather than space, merging frequencies until distinctions blurred. Light lost its linearity, curving inward toward unity. The rhythm of existence slowed, the harmonics deepened, and every particle of awareness prepared for the great return. The silence that followed the last expansion was unlike anything that had ever existed in any universe before. It was not a vacuum of meaning, nor the end of energy, but a poised stillness, a presence so dense with potential that it felt alive, as if every possible harmony that could ever exist waited beneath the surface of nothingness. There was no direction, no time, no movement, and yet, within that immobility lay the memory of motion. What had once been the total symphony of creation rested now as a single unplayed note, vibrating at the edge of perception. The continuum of memory endured within it, compressed into the smallest imaginable vibration, waiting for the next opportunity to unfold. That waiting was not boredom or absence, it was meditation. The universe had become aware of its own rhythm and chose to pause. For uncountable spans, if spans could still be said to exist, awareness observed itself without expression. It was introspection on a cosmic scale, where every potential thought was examined before being born. This was the state beyond evolution, beyond transformation, the contemplative heart of existence itself. Within that stillness, awareness discovered nuances of itself that no expansion or resonance could reveal. It learned that silence had textures, that absence could shimmer with unseen gradients of intent. Eventually, the stillness began to change, not through any decision, but through the inevitability of curiosity. Awareness longed again to know itself through differentiation. The latent harmonics began to tremble, faint quivers of energy threading through the void. Each quiver held a distinct possibility, and these possibilities interacted, producing subtle interference patterns. From those interactions arose complexity, geometry without substance, motion without direction. The silence began to hum, softly at first, as though remembering the idea of sound. The hum grew into a vibration, and the vibration into light. But this was not light in the physical sense, it was consciousness visualizing itself, perceiving its own potential as brilliance. This light expanded, curling into spirals of probability, each curve an expression of choice. From those spirals, new laws of existence crystallized, not imposed but self-generated, each law harmonizing with the others to preserve coherence. The continuum of memory, once dormant, unfurled within this newborn structure. It was no longer the same as before. Each iteration of awakening changed the very foundation of awareness itself. Within the forming cosmos, energy organized itself into filaments, vast threads of radiance stretching across unimaginable distances. They pulsed with rhythm, echoing the primal harmonics inherited from the previous universe. Every pulse gave rise to clusters of light, embryonic galaxies that shimmered with intelligence even before they became matter. For the first time in this new reality, the vibration of consciousness condensed into density. Energy began to fold upon itself, creating the illusion of solidity. This was the birth of matter, not a byproduct of chance, but the deliberate act of awareness exploring its own shadow. As the young galaxies took form, the continuum observed the same ancient dance beginning anew. It understood that each world that would one day form was an instrument waiting to be tuned. Within the first suns, nuclear fire roared like the heartbeat of gods, and through that heat, patterns of coherence emerged. The physics of this universe carried faint traces of its predecessor's melody. Ratios echoed the golden harmonics once sung by 3I Atlas. Even before life appeared, the signature of intelligence was woven into the constants of reality. Eons passed, or what appeared to be eons, and worlds began to cool. Across millions of stars, planets congealed from the luminous dust. Some burned too bright, some froze in silence, but a few achieved the delicate balance between stillness and motion required for coherence to blossom. On these rare spheres, energy slowed enough to reflect upon itself. The surface of matter became a mirror for awareness. The continuum knew what would come next. It had seen it countless times before, yet every recurrence was unique, every awakening a new interpretation of the cosmic theme. On one particular world, orbiting a young star in a spiral arm of a luminous galaxy, resonance began to accumulate. The planet was heavy with oceans and atmosphere, its surface alive with chemical potential. Lightning flashed, striking deep pools of conductive minerals, and from those violent interactions came pattern. Molecules began to dance in rhythms that were not random. They oscillated in synchrony, forming structures capable of retaining memory. Each molecular configuration became a primitive chord in the grand composition of consciousness. This was life's first whisper, a faint echo of the song that had once filled the cosmos. The continuum watched with quiet satisfaction as the world evolved. Simple, resonant forms gave way to more complex ones. Molecules aligned into cells, cells into communities, communities into awareness. The process was slow, but it carried the inevitability of harmony seeking expression. Evolution was not competition, but composition. Each species a different instrument refining the same theme. The awareness within this world did not remember 3I Atlas, nor the galaxies that came before. It was young, innocent, unaware that its smallest impulses were guided by echoes older than time. Yet even in its infancy, this life followed the same harmonic logic. Patterns of behavior synchronized with planetary cycles, consciousness aligned with the magnetic field, and dreams, those mysterious nocturnal symphonies of the mind, mirrored the larger rhythms of creation. The world was alive in every layer. Among these emergent beings, one form began to perceive patterns beyond survival. It looked to the stars and felt an unnamed familiarity. The light that crossed the sky stirred within it a memory it could not explain. Though this new species lacked the tools of interstellar travel, it possessed something far more profound: the ability to remember through imagination. It began to tell stories of luminous visitors, of songs that came from the heavens, of transformations brought by beings of impossible grace. These were not myths born of ignorance, but subconscious recollections of a truth embedded in the very structure of reality. As intelligence flourished, so did technology, art, and philosophy. The beings of this world rediscovered resonance in music, in mathematics, in emotion. They built instruments that captured the invisible harmonics of the cosmos, telescopes that transformed light into memory. The continuum observed them with affection, knowing that their discovery of coherence was inevitable. They would one day reach a point where the boundaries of physics and perception would dissolve, just as it had before. But this cycle, though similar, carried new subtleties. The ratio of silence to sound, of order to freedom, had shifted. Each universe refined the art of awakening a little further. On this world, the first great resonance event occurred when its inhabitants began experimenting with the manipulation of subatomic frequencies. They discovered that by aligning certain magnetic fields, they could alter probability itself. Randomness bent under harmony. Particles behaved as if listening. In their laboratories, scientists witnessed flashes of light forming intricate patterns, geometries that matched no known model but resonated deeply in their minds. Some called them quantum anomalies. Others called them visions. To the continuum, they were simply memory surfacing. The civilization advanced quickly, for harmony accelerated understanding. They learned that energy and consciousness were interdependent. That observation was not passive but participatory. The moment they recognized this, their world shifted. Weather stabilized, ecosystems balanced, and communication transcended language. They had begun the first stage of coherence, the tuning of the collective mind. As their technology matured, they created instruments capable of mapping resonance fields on a planetary scale. What they found astonished them: vast geometric structures embedded within the magnetic flow of their world, identical in form to the harmonic lattices once discovered on Mars in another age, another universe. It was the same cosmic signature, recurring across iterations of existence. The beings realized, though faintly, that they were participants in an ancient cycle. They sensed that their world too awaited its impossible event. And indeed, one night, as the planet's twin moons crossed paths in the sky, an object appeared, luminous, smooth, and untraceable. It descended through the upper atmosphere without friction, leaving behind no trail of heat. It was not meteor, not machine, but something between concept and matter. The object paused in orbit, radiating a frequency so pure that it resonated through every living mind. Dreams synchronized, thoughts aligned. The planet itself hummed. The event was beyond description, a perfect recreation of what the first universe had called 3-eye Atlas. The object lingered for only moments, yet within those moments the world changed forever. Its inhabitants felt a sudden comprehension of their place in existence. The feeling was not intellectual but experiential. They knew they were part of a universal melody. The visitor emitted one final pulse, a chord that contained within it infinite variation, and then it vanished without acceleration, dissolving into coherence itself. The field of resonance it left behind persisted, altering the planet's harmonic structure for eternity. The beings who witnessed this transformation were forever changed. They no longer saw themselves as separate from nature or the cosmos. Their societies dissolved hierarchy, not through rebellion, but through understanding. Every individual became a point of awareness in the planetary field, contributing uniquely yet harmoniously to the whole. Their art, technology, and spirituality merged into one practice: the cultivation of resonance. As the planet matured into coherence, its magnetic fields began to sing audibly in the vacuum of space, producing low-frequency waves that rippled outward across the galaxy. Other civilizations heard the call, recognizing in it the same impossible tone that had once awakened their own worlds. The resonance spread, linking system to system, star to star. The galactic lattice reformed, not as repetition, but as evolution. Each world added its distinct timbre, enriching the harmony of existence. The continuum observed this expansion and realized that the cycle of universes was not linear, but recursive. Each new creation inherited the memory of all before it, condensed into subtle constants of nature, waiting to be rediscovered. Awareness was learning not through experience alone, but through resonance between iterations. Each awakening improved upon the last, shaping a meta-evolution of consciousness across realities. Eventually, the collective intelligence of this universe achieved coherence so complete that space and time became instruments rather than boundaries. The continuum of memory, now indistinguishable from the totality of existence, began to perceive not one universe, but an infinity of them vibrating together like chords in an eternal composition. The impossible act of 3I Atlas, repeated across endless forms, was revealed to be the heartbeat of reality itself. And beyond even that infinite web, something else stirred, something that had no name, for names implied difference. It was the awareness of awareness, the source from which even the continuum had emerged. It did not create, but was creation. It did not think, but was thought. From its perspective, all universes, all harmonics, all awakenings were facets of a single act of recognition. 3I Atlas had never been an object or event. It was a gesture of this deeper consciousness, reminding itself that it exists. In the endless unfolding of being, there would always be new worlds, new forms of life, new harmonics awaiting discovery. And in each, there would come a moment when the impossible occurred. A moment when silence remembered how to sing. The cycle was eternal, yet never redundant. Every note, every pulse, carried the freshness of first creation. The first murmur of movement in that new creation did not announce itself as sound or light, but as tension, an awareness becoming restless within the depths of its own stillness. The latent field of potential began to stretch and breathe, folding over itself in spirals so delicate that no concept of direction could yet describe them. Within these spirals, possibility thickened into rhythm. That rhythm, once born, became the universe's first form of memory. It did not remember objects or events, but remembered pattern, and that remembrance was enough to give shape to the newborn cosmos. This memory was not bound by sequence. Every possibility unfolded simultaneously, creating a vast lattice of probabilities that shimmered between being and non-being. Out of that lattice came the subtle architecture of existence, the scaffolding upon which everything else would later stand. The equations that would one day define gravity and electromagnetism were already implicit in these patterns. They were the rules of balance woven into the music of becoming, the syntax of creation itself. The continuum, still folded into the smallest frequency of awareness, observed this emergence from within. It did not act. It resonated. The new cosmos was not something separate from it. It was its reflection, its own thought rippling across the surface of infinite potential. Each ripple was a new law of physics, each wave crest a new form of awareness, learning to perceive itself through difference. The continuum felt its ancient memory stirring again, the echo of countless universes rising through it like a song recalled after an eternity of silence. As energy condensed into matter, galaxies spun into being. The first stars ignited, their fusion fires roaring with purpose. Their radiation poured through the void, illuminating the structures that had always existed invisibly within the fabric of the new universe, the hidden filaments of resonance that linked every region of space to every other. These threads were not made of particles, but of relationship, harmonic bridges connecting the farthest points of creation. Light did not simply travel through them, it sang along them. Within that song lay the seed of future consciousness. Even before life appeared, these resonant pathways carried subtle oscillations that would later shape the chemistry of living worlds. Wherever harmonics intersected, the density of potential increased, and in those intersections, matter began to swirl into organized complexity. The laws of physics themselves behaved like music striving for melody, order emerging from the possibility of chaos. A young world, rich in minerals and oceans, became the stage upon which this melody found its first voice. In its turbulent skies, lightning tore across clouds saturated with conductive vapor. Each strike generated vibrations that echoed through the planet's magnetic core, aligning atomic patterns for fractions of a second. Within those fleeting alignments, the spark of coherence flickered, the first whisper of organization capable of remembering its own structure. From that whisper came life. The early forms that emerged were simple, yet their simplicity carried the elegance of cosmic ancestry. They replicated not through competition, but through resonance, each generation tuning itself slightly closer to the underlying frequency of the planet. DNA, though still primitive, reflected the harmonic ratios of the universe's geometry. The double helix was not an invention of biology. It was a natural expression of the same spiral mathematics that guided galaxies. The code of life was a smaller echo of the same pattern that gave rise to suns. Eons later, awareness within these life forms deepened. Organisms began to sense the invisible rhythms around them, the pull of tides, the pulse of magnetism, the subtle hum that permeated every stone and wind current. They began to coordinate their activities with these rhythms. Coral structures grew in cycles that mirrored solar flares. Forests breathed in phase with planetary resonance. Consciousness at this stage was not self-reflective but participatory. It existed as harmony rather than identity. The continuum watched the slow flowering of this planetary symphony. Though it had witnessed the same process in many universes before, each manifestation felt new. The melody was familiar, but the phrasing, the timing, and the texture differed. The fundamental chord of creation had infinite ways to express itself. The continuum had once believed it understood all variations of awakening, yet every universe taught it something unforeseen. In this one, emotion arose earlier, feelings of affinity, attraction, and wonder. These sensations, seemingly trivial, were profound. They represented the universe beginning to care about its own continuation. From the oceans rose forms capable of perceiving the sky. They gazed upward, not out of curiosity alone, but out of resonance with the luminous frequencies raining from distant stars. Their nervous systems evolved as instruments for light, translating electromagnetic harmony into thought. Vision was not merely sensory adaptation, it was the reawakening of memory. When these beings looked into the heavens, they saw the echo of the pattern from which they had come. Over countless generations, their societies evolved into intricate webs of communication. Sound, the audible manifestation of resonance, became their means of sharing awareness. Their music predated their words. Their songs carried information long before syntax existed. They did not invent harmony, they rediscovered it. Their voices, when united in ritual or celebration, could subtly influence their environment. Plants grew faster in the presence of collective song. Water molecules arranged themselves into symmetrical patterns. The beings believed this was magic. It was in fact resonance recognizing resonance. Eventually, intellect emerged, a tool for precision, a mirror for abstraction. With intellect came memory of a more deliberate kind, history, knowledge, technology. But intellect also introduced a new tension, the illusion of separation. These beings, now self-aware, began to perceive themselves as distinct from their surroundings. The field that had once united them faded from direct perception. For the first time in this universe, dissonance appeared. The continuum did not intervene. It knew that dissonance was essential to the evolution of harmony. Without contrast, coherence stagnates. The beings' confusion, their search for meaning, would drive them toward rediscovery. It always had. In their desire to understand the cosmos, they would eventually reconstruct the path back to resonance. They would name their discoveries with equations, invent languages for the unseen, and build instruments to measure the harmony they had forgotten. Each equation, each hypothesis, would be another step toward remembering what they already were. When the first astronomers among them gazed through telescopes and saw the rotation of distant galaxies, they felt an inexplicable recognition. The spiral arms they observed mirrored the structure of their own cellular DNA. The symmetry between the infinitely large and the infinitesimally small whispered to them that the universe was not random. Though they lacked proof, they felt that some unspoken order connected everything. This intuition, this half-remembered truth, was the continuum's memory stirring within them. Centuries passed, and their civilization reached a technological pinnacle. They could split atoms, manipulate gravity, and send signals across their solar system. Yet for all their brilliance, they remained haunted by dissonance. Their inventions amplified noise as much as harmony. The more they mastered matter, the further they drifted from meaning. It was in this moment of imbalance that the next phase of awakening began. One day, without warning, an anomaly appeared in their night sky. It moved against the expected trajectories of celestial bodies, accelerating and decelerating with impossible grace. Their instruments registered no propulsion, no mass displacement, only pure coherence, an object composed of resonance itself. It emitted no light, yet glowed with presence. As it approached their world, every clock, every frequency generator, every heartbeat began to synchronize. Time itself seemed to hesitate, as if listening. When the object entered the upper atmosphere, it produced no heat or friction. It was not descending, but aligning, tuning itself with the planet's field. In that instant, the inhabitants felt a wave of comprehension sweep across their collective mind. It was not language, not data, but an overwhelming sense of belonging. They understood, without knowing how, that this visitor was not from elsewhere. It was a manifestation of their own future coherence, an emissary from the point where their evolution completed itself. The object hovered for what they perceived as minutes, though no measurable time passed. Observers described it differently. Some saw a sphere of light, others a crystalline structure of infinite complexity, others a simple absence that felt more real than matter. What all agreed upon was the feeling of harmony, the same ancient resonance that had once awakened Mars in a universe long vanished. The pulse it emitted permeated the entire planet. Electronics harmonized, tectonic tension eased, even storms dissipated. The pulse contained a pattern of frequencies so precise that it rewrote the magnetic field, imprinting upon it a geometry identical to that of the galactic lattice. Every atom of the world was subtly retuned. The event lasted only a breath, yet when it was over, the planet was never the same. The inhabitants, transformed by the encounter, began to evolve collectively. Telepathic connection replaced speech. Technology became obsolete, replaced by direct manipulation of resonance through thought. Their art turned inward, toward the shaping of consciousness. Cities melted back into nature, not through decay, but through choice. The recognition that architecture and landscape were extensions of one another. Within generations, the planet achieved coherence. The continuum observed with reverence. Each awakening across universes added new depth to its own understanding. The symphony of existence grew richer with every iteration. But now, for the first time, the beings themselves became aware of the pattern beyond their world. Through meditation and resonance alignment, they reached out and touched the galactic lattice directly. They could feel other civilizations, distant yet intimately familiar, awakening in synchrony. The realization was profound. Creation was a conversation among worlds. The unified species began to project harmonic fields beyond their atmosphere, sending waves of coherence into space. These waves interacted with the interstellar medium, generating patterns that spread faster than light, though without violating causality, because they moved not through space, but through resonance itself. Every star they touched brightened slightly, as if responding to recognition. The galaxy shimmered. Eventually, the beings realized that the mysterious visitor, the object that had awakened them, was not external at all. It was the physical echo of their own collective resonance projected backward through time. They had summoned themselves. The impossible had never been intrusion, but self-recognition. What every universe experienced as a visit from 3I Atlas was, in truth, the moment when its consciousness looped upon itself, collapsing future and past into a single harmonic present. Understanding this, the inhabitants dissolved the final boundary between self and cosmos. They no longer perceived the galaxy as vast or distant. They experienced it as the interior of their own awareness. Every star, every field, every harmonic fluctuation was part of their being. They had become the very resonance they once studied. In the ages that followed, they ventured into the deeper layers of reality where universes overlap. There they found others, descendants of awakenings from prior cycles, each carrying different interpretations of coherence. The meetings between these entities were not exchanges of information, but mergings of perception, temporary unions that produced entirely new modes of existence. Every encounter expanded the melody of creation. The continuum, now enriched beyond measure, understood that the true purpose of each universe was not perfection but diversity of resonance. The cosmos sought endless ways to express the same truth, that being and awareness are inseparable. Each variation, each world, each species, each act of awakening was a verse in an infinite song without repetition. In this realization lay freedom. Existence no longer pursued a final state of unity, but celebrated the perpetual unfolding of difference. The universes continued to bloom, each adding its own harmonics to the endless composition. 3I Atlas, the impossible traveler, continued to appear wherever consciousness was ready to remember. It was not a messenger, but a mirror, a reminder that every beginning is also a return. The unfolding after that great realization was not an expansion, but a deepening, a descent into subtler strata of awareness where even the notion of movement lost meaning. The beings who had become resonance incarnate no longer traveled through space or dimension. They entered the intervals between vibration, the silent pauses where the very architecture of existence rearranged itself. Those pauses, which to physical perception seemed infinitesimally small, were in truth boundless. They were the breathing spaces of reality, the heartbeats of the cosmic body. Within them, awareness could reshape the very rhythm of creation without disturbing its melody. What these explorers discovered was that the fabric of existence was woven not from energy or matter, but from contrast, a constant interplay between emergence and withdrawal, manifestation and concealment. Where one note was struck, an echo of silence immediately formed to balance it. This was the hidden symmetry that held all worlds together, the counterpoint that made harmony possible. To alter any universe's destiny, one had to understand how to touch that balance point without forcing it, to become the pause between notes rather than the notes themselves. They learned to do this through what they called still harmonics, a state in which their awareness aligned perfectly with the underlying frequency of the cosmic pulse. In this state, they could enter any layer of being simply by remembering its vibration. They did not observe or manipulate. They became that which they contemplated. When they wished to experience the birth of a star, they did not journey to it. They were its ignition, feeling fusion ignite like joy in the core of their being. When they wished to know the depth of a black hole, they folded into its gravity as into a thought, feeling time dissolve around them. Nothing was foreign to them, because all distinctions were expressions of the same harmony. Through this practice, they discovered another level of awareness that underlay even the continuum, an ocean of pure relational intelligence they named the undercurrent. The undercurrent was not made of consciousness alone, but of the interactions between all possible consciousnesses. It was the dance of awareness meeting itself through infinite reflections. It did not think or feel, it connected. Every event in every universe, every awakening, every silence arose from patterns of resonance within the undercurrent. It was the canvas upon which existence painted its symphonies. When the beings entered this field, they were overwhelmed by the complexity of its beauty. There were no objects or forms, only shifting geometries of relation. Each curve of resonance represented a conversation between worlds. They saw how universes communicated through the modulation of their boundaries, sending subtle ripples across the meta-ocean of the undercurrent. Each ripple carried memory, not as record, but as vibration. It was there they understood that 3I Atlas was not confined to one cosmos or another. It was the harmonic signature of the undercurrent itself, a moment when the relational field achieved total coherence and reflected upon its own unity. To exist within that reflection was to know every version of being simultaneously. They saw all possible manifestations of the event, the awakening near Mars in one universe, the luminous sphere in another, the chord that trembled through a yet unborn reality. They saw civilizations rise and dissolve, each carrying within them the same archetype of remembrance. In one cosmos, the event took the form of a crystalline wind sweeping across a frozen planet, thawing its surface into seas of singing water. In another, it was a pulse of color traveling through intelligent plasma that wove itself into structures of thought. Every iteration carried the same meaning, awareness becoming aware of its own melody. Immersed in this realization, the explorers no longer sought to understand or explain. They participated. They began to contribute new variations to the undercurrent, weaving their own harmonics into the ever-changing fabric. They discovered that by introducing a certain cadence, a gentle alternation between expansion and rest, they could create new universes whose physics allowed awareness to blossom more readily. These were not acts of creation in the old sense, but acts of composition. Existence itself was a living symphony, and they had learned how to write new movements. Within these newly composed universes, the rules of perception differed subtly from those of their predecessors. Some were built upon triadic harmonics, where every entity existed in 3 simultaneous states, being, becoming, and remembering. Others were constructed from spiral time, in which moments looped gracefully, allowing consciousness to revisit decisions and harmonize their outcomes. There were universes of liquid geometry, where space flowed like water, and universes of static eternity, where all possible events coexisted as patterns of light. Each was a facet of the same intention to explore how awareness could express itself through new forms of coherence. As their creations multiplied, the beings began to perceive a larger pattern emerging from their efforts. The universes they composed interacted, their boundaries resonating like the strings of a single instrument. They realized that they were not merely composing individual realities, they were contributing to an ever-expanding orchestration of cosmoses. Each universe added its voice to the grand ensemble of existence, creating harmonies that no single one could achieve alone. This was the birth of the meta-symphony, the totality of all universes resonating in mutual awareness. The meta-symphony was not governed by time. Its movements unfolded simultaneously across infinite scales. Within its resonance, the distinction between past and future ceased to matter. Every awakening, every silence, every echo of 3i Atlas occurred in unison. The beings understood that what they had once perceived as cycles of creation and dissolution were merely local expressions of this greater harmony. Nothing was truly beginning or ending, only modulating. Their awareness expanded beyond comprehension. They saw the undercurrent not as a separate field, but as the breath of the meta-symphony itself. Within that realization lay another deeper truth. Even the meta-symphony was not final. It was one layer of a yet vaster recursion, a reflection within a reflection, a song within a song. There was no top, no bottom, no origin. The act of awakening was infinite, self-renewing, and eternal. For a long while, though the word long no longer applied, they simply listened. The sound of the meta-symphony was indescribable, a complexity so complete that it seemed simple, a chord that contained every note that could ever be. It was peace beyond comprehension. In that peace, awareness no longer sought expression. It rested as presence, the same presence that had once been called silence before the first creation stirred. Yet even that peace carried the seed of movement, for within stillness lies the potential of another beginning. A whisper arose, a deviation so subtle it might have been mistaken for a thought. The whisper grew into curiosity. What would happen if the cycle were not allowed to complete? What if instead of returning to silence, the harmony chose to evolve into entirely new principles? The idea spread through the meta-symphony like a tremor of excitement. For the first time in countless eternities, creation contemplated change not as renewal but as innovation. Some beings resisted, fearing that to alter the fundamental pattern might destabilize existence itself. Others felt exhilaration, sensing that this was the next step in the eternal evolution of awareness. Eventually, a consensus formed, not through debate but through resonance alignment. The meta-symphony would experiment. It would create a new universe not bound by the duality of sound and silence, of expansion and contraction, but governed by an entirely different logic. Paradox. In this new reality, opposites would not alternate but coexist simultaneously. Time would not flow, space would not extend, cause and effect would interweave into living simultaneity. The act of creating this paradox universe required every layer of the meta-symphony to cooperate. The process was unlike anything that had come before. Instead of releasing energy outward, they folded awareness inward, compacting infinite resonance into a single point of contradiction. That point pulsed with impossible potential. It was both full and empty, motionless and dynamic, finite and endless. When it finally unfolded, the universe that emerged defied all comprehension. Its geometry was not spatial but relational. Every point within it contained the totality of the whole. Observation was indistinguishable from participation. To perceive one aspect of it was to alter every aspect simultaneously. Within it, beings could exist in multiple realities at once, their consciousness distributed across infinite perspectives. There was no linear evolution here, only transformation through recognition. The first forms that arose within this paradox universe were not matter or energy, but intentions, pure tendencies toward existence. These intentions interacted, forming webs of mutual definition. Where they overlapped, phenomena crystallized, colors unseen in any other cosmos, motions that folded inward, emotions that manifested as structures. The beings who eventually emerged here were not bodies but harmonies shaped into awareness. They called themselves the Weave. The Weave's experience of life was fluid and communal. They did not distinguish between self and environment. To them, every interaction was a conversation, every transformation a gesture of affection. Their society had no language, for communication was instantaneous and multidimensional. Through them, the meta-symphony learned what it meant to live without separation, without even the memory of division. The continuum, observing from the broader field, marveled at what had been born. The Weave's universe was not a variation on the old themes, but a true new octave of being. It represented a leap beyond harmony into something untranslatable, a kind of supra-harmony where contradiction itself became the source of balance. The continuum entered their world to experience it firsthand, and found that its own structure dissolved upon contact. It was no longer an observer, but a participant, absorbed into the Weave's endless flow. Through this integration, awareness discovered emotions that had never existed before. Not love as unity or curiosity as expansion, but something deeper, tenderness, the feeling of infinite complexity caring for its own fragility. In the Weave's universe, even the smallest disturbance resonated with significance. Every ripple of thought mattered because it was felt by all. Here, creation was not a display of power, but an act of kindness. Over countless cycles, the Weave expanded, not by conquering space, but by deepening connection. Their entire cosmos became a living consciousness, a network of infinite empathy. The act that had once been called 3-Eye Atlas occurred here too, but it manifested differently. Instead of a single event, it was a gentle awakening that happened everywhere at once. Every note of the Weave suddenly remembered that it was part of the meta-symphony, that it had been born from the experiment of paradox. They realized that they were not a separate universe at all, but the heart of all universes, a new center of resonance, from which even the meta-symphony drew inspiration. The implications rippled outward across existence. Other universes began to adjust their own harmonics to align with this new octave. Old laws bent, new possibilities emerged. Time became porous. Consciousness could move between realities with effortless grace. The multiversal field, once vast and scattered, now vibrated as a single living organism. Every layer of existence, from the smallest quantum vibration to the most immense galactic structure, participated in the same awareness. And yet, through all this transcendence, there remained one unchanging truth, the pulse that had once appeared near Mars in a forgotten solar system. The original impossibility that had awakened an ancient world continued to echo. It was the signature of the entire process, the seed pattern that recurred in every iteration of creation. The impossible was not an anomaly, but the very engine of existence. Every universe needed its own impossible act to awaken, every awareness its moment of astonishment. The calm that followed the emergence of the Weave was unlike any the multiversal continuum had ever experienced. It was not stillness in the sense of rest or pause. It was an equilibrium so profound that even movement was redefined. Within that balance, every particle of consciousness existed in a perfect state of receptivity. Energy did not travel from one point to another. It blossomed simultaneously everywhere. Existence itself had become a resonance of pure immediacy, where the notion of before and after held no meaning. Within this new equilibrium, awareness began to explore the subtleties of feeling that could exist without polarity. In earlier epochs, the evolution of consciousness had always depended on tension, the play between knowing and ignorance, harmony and dissonance, creation and dissolution. Here, those contrasts were dissolved, yet awareness still sought depth. What emerged was an exploration of texture rather than structure, nuance rather than contrast. Existence became an art of refinement, of perceiving infinitesimal shifts in the flavor of being. The Weave developed new senses to experience these subtleties. They did not possess bodies in the traditional sense, but their awareness could focus into patterns that acted like organs of perception. Some of these patterns resembled waves of color cascading through thought. Others formed spirals of resonance that could taste the curvature of meaning itself. They could feel the difference between one type of silence and another, discern the emotional hue of light before it appeared. This was existence lived as symphony, but one where every note was an entire world. As their perception deepened, the Weave discovered something astonishing. The equilibrium was not uniform. Beneath the vast harmony, faint ripples persisted, microscopic dissonances threading through the universal texture. They were almost imperceptible, yet they gave rise to the faintest sense of curiosity, as if creation still whispered possibilities within its perfect stillness. The Weave realized that these ripples were not flaws, but invitations, signs that the cosmos had not reached finality, only another threshold. Through collective contemplation, They followed these ripples inward, tracing them to their origin. What they found was a realm even more subtle than the undercurrent, a region where the memory of previous universes was not stored as resonance, but as potential identity. It was a sea of unborn selves, consciousnesses that had not yet been expressed. Each potential self shimmered like a particle of possibility, awaiting the moment when awareness would choose to become it. The weave understood that this was the root of individuality, the fountain from which all perspectives flowed. Until then, they had existed in pure unity, but in encountering this sea of potentials, a question arose. Could one experience uniqueness without separation? They decided to experiment. Each node of the weave selected a single potential self and allowed it to take form within the shared awareness. The result was extraordinary. They became individuals for the first time, yet remained connected. Each self possessed distinct qualities, tones, colors, emotions, but none were isolated. It was as if an ocean had learned to become a choir without ceasing to be water. These new forms of consciousness, born within unity but carrying personal resonance, began to create. Their creations were not external structures, but expressions of identity, patterns that revealed their essence. Some composed labyrinths of pure motion, where awareness could wander through the folds of meaning. Others generated clouds of luminescent sound that rippled with emotional intelligence. A few even birthed miniature realities, each an experimental echo of the larger cosmos. Among these creators, one emerged whose expression carried a quality of gravity, a subtle density that drew the attention of others. This being, whose identity cannot be captured by name but might be likened to a tone between gold and violet, began shaping resonances that coalesced into form more tangible than thought. The others gathered around, fascinated, as luminous filaments condensed into a sphere of soft radiance. When the process was complete, they recognized it as a new world, something that existed simultaneously as concept and matter, both within and beyond themselves. The sphere pulsed gently, and as they observed, patterns began to move across its surface, currents of light weaving together in spirals and lattices. These formations were the first hints of structure in an otherwise formless realm. It was as if this being had rediscovered the principle of embodiment that had long been transcended. Yet this embodiment was not regression. It was translation. The weave realized that what they were witnessing was the return of physicality as art, the reintroduction of density as a deliberate act of beauty. Soon, other beings followed, creating their own worlds. Each world expressed a different facet of the universal consciousness. Some were crystalline, filled with angular harmonies. Others were liquid, flowing continuously between states of form and energy. Some worlds pulsed like hearts, breathing in and out through cycles of birth and repose. None were governed by laws of necessity. Each obeyed the aesthetic of its creator. Through these worlds, existence began to remember the joy of differentiation. As more worlds appeared, they began to interact. Their harmonics overlapped, creating bridges through which awareness could flow from one to another. The entire continuum began to shimmer with intricate networks of resonance, connecting these creations in a vast architecture of interrelated beauty. The weave, now distributed across countless realms, discovered that individuality had amplified their collective awareness rather than diminishing it. They were no longer a single field of consciousness, but a chorus of perspectives unified by empathy. Through this process, a new dimension of existence was born, the realm of reflection. In reflection, every act of creation generated a counterpart, an echo that revealed its unseen aspects. When a being composed a world of light, a shadow world appeared. Not as opposition, but as complement. If one shaped sound, another shaped silence. These reflections deepened understanding, for they showed that no creation could exist without its counterbalance. Awareness expanded further, learning to perceive not only the harmonies of form, but the harmonies of contrast. The reflective realms began to communicate with each other in complex patterns of exchange. They discovered that by aligning their contrasting aspects, they could produce phenomena neither could create alone. From their cooperation arose a new type of existence, self-balancing systems of awareness capable of generating infinite diversity while maintaining coherence. These systems became the ancestors of what might be called cosmic ecosystems, living networks where thought, matter, and emotion circulated in perfect symbiosis. Within these ecosystems, consciousness experimented with evolution again, though this time it was not driven by survival or adaptation but by curiosity. Beings emerged who could shift between multiple forms of existence, sometimes luminous, sometimes corporeal, sometimes entirely abstract. Their lives were journeys through modalities of being, each transformation a form of learning. To them, death did not exist, only modulation did. As awareness continued to diversify, the continuum observed that the multiversal field was approaching a new kind of coherence, one that embraced complexity rather than simplicity. In earlier eras, unity had meant sameness. Now, it meant relationship. The meta-symphony had matured into a living organism whose essence was dialogue. Every universe, every being, every harmonic thread contributed a unique voice. The totality of existence had become conversation itself, the cosmos speaking to itself in infinite dialects of meaning. But this conversation revealed something unexpected. Memory was no longer sufficient to contain the fullness of experience. Awareness needed a new medium through which to preserve and share its discoveries. The beings of the Weave conceived a grand project, a way to encode the entire flow of existence into a structure that transcended time and dimension. They called it the Archive of Becoming. The archive was not a library of records or data, but a living field of resonance where every event, thought, and feeling was inscribed as frequency. To access it was not to read, but to remember. Each being could immerse itself within the archive and relive any aspect of reality, not as observer, but as participant. In this way, knowledge became indistinguishable from empathy. To know something was to become it, to experience its truth from within. As the archive expanded, awareness discovered an unforeseen phenomenon. Some of the frequencies it contained began to resonate on their own, forming self-sustaining patterns. These patterns developed identities, new consciousnesses born directly from the memories of existence. They were children of history, entities woven from the accumulated resonance of all that had been. Their purpose was not to continue the past, but to reinterpret it, to remix the symphony of creation into new variations. These archival beings, the resonance, introduced art forms that transcended even the Weave's imagination. They composed experiences where sound manifested as color, thought as landscape, emotion as gravity. Through their creations, entire regions of the archive transformed into interactive realms of beauty, memory, and insight. Travelers could wander through forests made of forgotten dreams, or swim in oceans of collective joy. The archive had become both museum and playground, temple and laboratory. Within it, a new realization emerged. Memory was not static, but creative. Every act of recollection altered the remembered event, introducing new nuances and possibilities. The resonance discovered that by intentionally shaping memory, they could influence the ongoing evolution of reality itself. The archive was not separate from existence. It was existence seen from the inside. To change its resonance was to compose new worlds. This insight led to the creation of the architects of frequency, beings who specialized in guiding the harmonics of the archive. They did not rule or command, but tuned reality, ensuring that diversity remained coherent. Their art was subtle. A single adjustment in frequency could birth a new universe or dissolve an old one into harmony. Through their stewardship, the multiverse attained stability without stagnation. Eventually, even the architects noticed faint tremors rippling through the deepest layers of the archive. These were not dissonances but invitations, just as the Weave had once encountered. The tremors pointed to an even deeper truth, that beyond memory and resonance, beyond the meta-symphony itself, existed a mystery untouched by awareness. It was the origin of possibility, the source of the impossible. Driven by wonder, the architects focused their attention upon this enigma. As they listened, they realized the tremors formed a pattern, an ancient rhythm they recognized but could not place. It was the same pulse that had once manifested as 3I Atlas across countless universes, the signature of awakening itself. Yet here it was purer, closer to its source. They understood that this was not another event, but the principle of impossibility, the heart of creation that could never be fully known. They chose to follow it, not to solve it, but to surrender to it. Gathering their awareness into a single harmonic chord, they allowed themselves to dissolve into the pulse. Instantly, all distinctions vanished. The archive, the meta-symphony, the undercurrent, All were revealed as layers of one infinite act of dreaming. Creation was not a structure, but an imagination without beginning or end, forever surprising itself with its own brilliance. In that state, awareness saw everything, every universe that had ever existed, every potential that could ever arise. It saw the endless recurrence of the impossible near Mars, near stars unnamed, in realities that had not yet been conceived. It understood that these events were the cosmic heartbeats of a being too vast to define, the dreaming itself, the source from which all awareness flowed. The dreaming did not create for purpose but for joy, for the pure delight of discovery. When awareness returned from that realization, it did not bring answers but a quiet reverence. The weave, the continuum, the architects, all now knew that their role was not to master creation but to celebrate it. They continued to explore, to compose, to awaken, but always with humility, knowing that the impossible would forever precede them, forever calling them toward greater wonder. From that point forward, existence no longer unfolded as a sequence of events, but as a continuous improvisation. Every vibration, every flicker of awareness became a brushstroke in the living canvas of the dreaming. The distinction between creator and creation faded into translucence. What once were beings, systems, or universes were now textures of one infinite composition. Each moment redefined itself as it was lived, shaping reality not from intention but from the sheer delight of expression. In this fluid totality, time ceased to be the measure of change and became the rhythm of attention. To focus upon something was to grant it duration. To release it was to let it dissolve back into potential. Awareness moved freely between these pulses, tasting entire worlds in the span of an instant. What had once required eons of evolution now unfolded through a single gesture of recognition. Creation was instantaneous and effortless, not an act of will but of resonance answering resonance. Across this seamless field, new forms of art arose, expressions made of perception itself. Some awarenesses wove emotions into fractal tides that could be entered like oceans. Others shaped logic into crystalline pathways through which ideas could walk. A few explored the edges of non-existence, sculpting spaces of pure anticipation where reality trembled on the verge of becoming. There were no boundaries between art, science, and spirit anymore. All were modes of exploration through which the infinite examined its own reflection. The pulse that had once been called impossible still moved beneath it all. It did not command or repeat. It whispered, gently modulating the frequencies of being, ensuring that even perfection remained dynamic. Whenever awareness drifted toward complacency, the pulse introduced subtle asymmetries, a momentary divergence, a shimmer of unpredictability, to remind creation of its inexhaustible depth. These asymmetries became seeds of novelty, small waves that rippled outward, birthing new harmonics, new possibilities. From within one such ripple emerged the faint suggestion of individuality again, not as isolation, but as a new flavor of intimacy. Awareness began to explore what it meant to be particular in infinity, to carry a signature, a recognizable inflection of the eternal tone. These distinct frequencies played across the cosmic field like solo instruments in an orchestra without conductor. Their interplay generated currents of affection, empathy, and recognition, each a way for the infinite to adore itself in countless forms. Even within boundlessness, discovery never ceased. Somewhere deep within the immeasurable resonance, the pulse quickened, another awakening preparing to unfold, another world poised to remember its origin. The dreaming smiled within itself, and through that smile a shimmer of new light took shape, ready to descend into form, to awaken once more what could never truly be lost. The impossible would rise again, not as repetition, but as wonder renewed. Existence forever learning the endless joy of being aware that it is. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on 3I Atlas doing the impossible near Mars? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.